Sometimes it feels weird to do these introductions. I've shouted it from the bell towers for what feels like 3 months now, but this is the continuation of the Road to Paradox and mainly the 3 Charms series. R, or what its longer title is, which is a mouthful. The 12 Monster Girls of Maharoba, featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series, and with a quick forward covering the history of the dagger sandwich. R is fine. R is short. I'll be calling it by R from now on. And if you got a problem with that, yeah, I don't know, just assume I'm calling it by the full title every time I say R. With me and my mush mouth, I don't want to have to re-record chunks of audio because I fudged up on the word Maharoba. Or 12. Or of. Anywho, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video around. Maybe hit up my Patreon to become a ticket holder for at least $1 to get your name in the credits. Additional videos like thumbnail time lapses and the Showtime reels, the scripts in their entirety, and more. Or don't. I ain't your Uncle Monkey, because you're not a monkey's nephew or niece. If you remember from last time, 3 Charms was released on May 21st, 2017. R saw a DL site page on May 16th of 2018, giving us slightly less than a year's time for development. That confers to me that this might have been an MGQ Chapter 1 and 2 situation, where both were practically written and shipped out together, one seeing a March 2011 release to December. Pulling back to the bigger picture, A Lonesome Spirit, the finale to the 3 Charms trilogy, came out in 2020, so I find this highly probable speculation, and disconnected from this, fitting with the successor narrative that I attribute TTC for having with MGQ. Chapter 3 was a June 2013 title, creating a funny parallel of a 2-year time gap for the 3rd installment. Where I get caught in the reeds is that if both TDC and R were developed around the same time, does that mean 3 Charms was essentially a mock-up for what this title would be? Unfinished is hardly the claim I'm making, more proof of concept that could stand on its own, but serve as a space to refine ideas into a finished vision. If the length of this video didn't give it away, R is grandiose in its undertaking, dwarfing its predecessor. Since it still runs on RPG Maker, it wouldn't be that hard to pull up a prototype build of 3 Charms during off hours or when making pass-throughs and discovering new techniques to make the engine work for you. Or just pull up the assets and toy around with them. Minwa is an artist first. I got flashbanged by their art on DL site for a different Circles product, so I'd bet dollars, yen, to donuts. Great, now I'm making the Pokemon references. that TTC was a learning experience and that all the stuff Minwa probably wanted to implement for the debut outing had to be put off for R because skill is learned and developed, not bolted in your head from out of the blue. And usually you learn all the insights right near the tail end of a project for extra irony. There is a joke in the post-game area of Three Charms that references the exact code needed to pull off a visual effect, the Pillar of Fire, so there might be some credence to my line of thinking. This is what makes this tab quite mercurial, as without solid documentation, I have to go off cues from the games themselves and how they change to basically piecemeal together a development history. And that's giving far too much credit to what is in all regards personal speculation based on context clues. To give an example for what I mean, I believe that R's gameplay loop was meant to be the norm for the series, but when you start off in a field that you are wholly new to, you have to figure out how to make things work before you can make the thing in your head work, thus bridging the gap between TDC's escape battles and R's tests of endurance. By default, R assumes you haven't played the Three Charms, which is an odd choice for a direct sequel, unless you viewed this decision with the lens I've crafted. There's some observational hilarity at play since DL site lists the purchased amount for a product, Three Charms sitting at 60,000 buys while R has 50,000. The biggest unknowns to me are when TDC actually started development and what happened during the 1-year gap. For all I know, Three Charms and R weren't a parallel development, and I'm pulling things out of my ass. But then, why include a highlight recap in the opening moments of R that summarizes Three Charms so that a new player could go in without having experienced the first game? That sends mixed intentions. What I can say is that the spin-off title was the first of the rest of Minwa's future endeavors to get documented via their personal blog, with demos for Lonesome Spirit getting released through there. That actually has a bit of activity, leaving me in this weird dead zone for R. Once again, this is a DL site release that had to be translated, this time unofficially by Conti. Support the official release and find the patch files needed to get yourself going. Oh, and make sure you have locale emulator on standby. We once again get the spiel of a long time ago, but to cut to the chase, our tale opens up sometime in the Edo period of Japan, literally a month after the events of Three Charms. Why am I specifying Edo? You'll see. Front towards enemy applies to a lot more than claymores. Katanas? Yaris? Guns are gonna be involved in the story, okay? Though we aren't in Zatoichi territory. Not yet. In the time between the ending of Three Charms and now, Hakonen has been inducted as a citizen of Maharoba Mountain to initial hesitancy, but the apprentice being who he is, he's made friends with practically everyone. On his apprenticeship, mayhaps things could be going better? It's no secret. Not when you're as blatant as these two. However, Hakonen has gotten it into his mind that his training isn't what he asked for, enjoying the pampering but wishing to be someone who could stand alongside yokai as their equal. He wants... no, needs more power. Should I prep a blue coat for now or later? It would go along with Magatsu's red. Relenting this time, the Oni Master decides to humor her apprentice, pointing him towards the Trial of Spirits. Monks used to harden their body to sharpen their mind by walking the trail, Hakonen all too eager to join that vaunted legacy. However, he's left off with a warning before his climb. A return before nightfall. Maharoba is a big place, sectioned off by territory. Where the Trial of Spirits is, Magatsu has no sway. In the event he runs into them, Magatsu hands Hakonen back the 3 charms as a means of defense. Wished off well, the apprentice begins the arduous climb, cutting through a cave system where he bears witness to a few vignettes of sorts. Someone old, someone new, so I'll do the proper introductions later. Reaching the base of the trial, the last remnant of the monks of yore is a simple homestead for weary travelers that Hakonen pays no mind to. Boy howdy, that's a mountain of steps, and our apprentice has to climb the whole lot of them. Uh-oh. I'm getting flashbacks. Oh, come on, man. Can you not spend the whole day doing one task? Apparently, Hakonen cannot. And with his body bristling full of energy, that makes him a prime target. Enter Tsukumo. And from stage right and left, Shiraha and Azuki, the power trio Magatsu alluded to with her warning. Each one of them offers an opinion on the apprentice, ranging from carnal curiosity akin to other yokai we've seen, to outright hostility uncommon to the species. Wasting no time with her threats, Azuki steps up to the plate, brandishing her matchlock rifle with quick efficiency. Proficient with the charms, Hakonen's able to stifle the Oni's assault, but when it comes to a battle of reflexes, Azuki is faster, landing a paralyzing shot on the apprentice, leaving him at her mercy. Claiming her defeated prey, Azuki rapes Hakonen as Tsukumo and Shiraha watch on. Unceremoniously dumped off at the base of the steps, back where that rundown shack was, Hakonen wakes sometime after the ordeal, his body sluggish and heavy. Yokai are known to feed off the energy of humans, so all that training was for naught. Having grown aware of what has happened to her apprentice, Magatsu reconvenes with Hakonen, giving him the lowdown of who the trio are, as well as apologizing for not being there when he needed it. Turns out, this house on the mountain has been converted to a meat locker of sorts. Azuki, Tsukumo, and Shiraha storing any mail they find for later consumption. However, as humans have rarely ventured up the mountain, it's seen disuse. Until Hakonen's arrival. Seems he sparked a long-standing feud between Magatsu, Tsukumo, and Shiraha, one Hakonen is keen to solve. Let's call it training by way of fire. And if it means that it'll change the beliefs of Tsukumo, Shiraha, and Azuki that humans are friends, not food, that'll be a bonus. Thankfully, Hakonen won't be alone for these 12 labors, as Magatsu appoints Yamachichi as the apprentice's shadow. Not to directly interfere, but to help with his travels across the mountain. Bright and early next morning, Hakonen begins what will become a tradition for his stay on this part of Maharoba. Climbing those damn stairs. With but one path open to him at this moment, Hakonen rushes down what is unknowingly the route to Azuki's domain. The local sites are oddly familiar, overrun with kitsune hosting various parties and celebrations. Some Fox even hired entertainment, as we see the dancer girl from earlier during the vignette I skipped over. Glad to see she got work. Dodging all manner of foxfire, Hakonen has another reunion with a person from his past. Bride Fox. News spreads fast as it seems like the foxy wife wants to help with her hubby's training. A nice little warm-up to get back into the swing of things. In spite of her husband's victory, Bride Fox does try to dissuade Hakonen from continuing, not wishing to see him in any danger, but as the former monk says, if he walks away now, he'll be a slave to the Triumvirate without them even touching him. The reassurance wins over Bride Fox. Hakonen sent off with cheers in his corner from her, and his mind concentrated on the task ahead. A well-earned rest is in order. But a slavering she-beast finds herself inside the apprentice's den. Yeah, that's a new problem. A good majority of the yokai this side of Maharoba are aware of the hovel's reputation, and if Hakonen doesn't find some way to dissipate the energy out of himself before sleeping, he'll be a victim of night crawling. This is stair climb number 2. Where foxes congregate, a great banquet is surely held, this one localized to the House of Illusions. Miss Dancer welcomes Hakonen to the abode, introducing herself as Zashiki, informing the apprentice of the dead pool centered on him. Bunch of no favors, these kitsune, though Sashiki adds herself to the list, playfully mocking Hakonen and Magatsu's relationship before proclaiming that she'll steal him away. If Hakonen makes it to her, that is. One romp through an ICP song later, getting us reacquainted with Sister Kitsune, or Sexy Kitsune if you're feeling frisky. Zashiki's still wet behind the ears, a fact proven with a sore loser's outburst. But composing herself, Zashiki claims this isn't over, the rising star wishing to face off against Hakonen again, this time on an even grander stage. While he could make do without the provocation, Hakonen mentally honors the dancer's wish as the two head separate ways. Zashiki to who knows where to continue honing her skills, and our apprentice a bog home to the Kodamas to continue honing his skills. Like-minded, those two. As the Kodama are rooted in place, their means of bewitching Hakonen is decidedly passive, hoping he either bumbles right into them or accidentally wafts their fragrance, but the local kitsune population doesn't ease matters. Oh hey Zashiki, you're a little early for revenge. Stair climb number 3. The second attempt to avoid the clouds of pollen is less embarrassing, though Hakonen winds up running into a dead end. As if someone wanted. Fuck. Hello, Time Yokai. Still as grudge-bearing as a dwarf, the sorceress has some plans for Maharoba, brainwashing Hakonen into fetching a few scattered items for her. White dew from a kitsune, a cursed arrow from a dilapidated cottage deep in the wetlands, and... Oh, that's a skull. Well, the feeling is mutual, Hakonen. I too have lived in a house hiding a few bones here and there. I can't tell you the purpose of these items, Daime Yokai's keeping her lips sealed tight, but she doesn't cackle away from Hakonen empty-handed. The promise she made a month ago is finally fulfilled. Talk about shattering dreams. With the barrier keeping Yamachichi at bay lowered, she recovers Hakonen and tries to question him on specifics back at the bungalow. Nothing. We're at 4 now. Able to get past the crystalline structures with Daime Yokai's ability, Hakonen finds himself further in the wetlands in an impromptu meeting with Princess Kodama. Absent-minded like her sisters, the royal isn't too taxing for Hakonen, applauding his efforts by teaching him how to be as graceful as a flower. Withering ivy will no longer be unclimbable. Continuing on the path put before him, it has been a couple of days for Hakonen. Enough for Magatsu to have felt his absence and want to check up on him. But besides placating her loneliness, Magatsu does bear the gift of knowledge to Hakonen. Hazuki, whose domain he's nearing, isn't one for fair fights. Stating the obvious, but what was that about not bullying her? Pin that. Same for Daime Yokai's ongoing shenanigans. Done with the heavy conversation topics, the Oni teacher figures prodding her apprentice for his likes would make for an excellent counterbalance. A bit of levity before having a gun shoved in your face. The game of cat and mouse is afoot. Huh. Wasn't expecting Hazuki to be the gardening type. Though I don't know if this Kodama is a weed or... Scratch it. Up to 5. Not stopping to smell the flowers, Hakonen's battle with Hazuki spills out across the gun-toting Oni's firing range, the two coming to verbal blows at the edge of a ravine. Hazuki doesn't give a single shit about Hakonen's training, nor his need to be recognized as a member of the mountain, goading him into killing her, with her matchlock no less. The rule of strong is the rule of Maharoba. Needless bloodshed isn't Hakonen's style, though, the former monk tossing the rifle back to Hazuki, who stands, in her mind, the victor of this debate. But then, why hand Hakonen a loaded gun? Latching onto that notion, Hakonen trudges forward, Daime Yokai taking time out of her schedule to harass the apprentice with that idea. Thankfully, Yamachichi and Magatsu step up to Daime Yokai and get her to flee, snapping Hakonen out of his haze and halting Franami's execution. Team meeting at Hakonen's place, the trio go over the game plan. Hakonen and Yamachichi will continue the trial, while Magatsu investigates Daimyokai. Next up, Tsukumo. Her domain is sequestered in the Howling Caverns, though the spider has eyes and ears everywhere, courtesy of her Ashimi Karakuris, one delivering a message to Magatsu, confirming the peril Hakonen is unknowingly barging into. But more than that, the Ashimi picks at the wound festering between Magatsu and the Farside trio. Azuki's hatred of humans is deeply personal. Relayed what was told to her doll, Tsukumo ironically highlights the pettiness of her and Magatsu's squabble before conducting her own search for Daimyokai. In the meanwhile, caves. Damp, dark, and dank just like I like them. Oh, and you bet your ass it's filled with Akaname. Speaking of, Furname. Glad to see she wasn't phased in the slightest at her imminent death, the ditzy slug repaying Hakonen with a friendly sparring session. It's no surprise who comes out on top, but Furnami does drop a bombshell to Hakonen after the bout. Apparently those who are repeatedly drained by yokai have their body changed to fit that need. As in, their energy becomes easier to subsume by yokai. That's worrisome if true. Here's hoping Furnami is incorrect on some of the details. With that lingering around as a specter in his mind, Hakonen is unaware of the spying he's the mark of, Tsukumo and her army of Ashimis monitoring his progress. I should say voyeurism going off what is actually said, Tsukumo perplexed by the turn of events. Back to our guy, he's doing his own spying, this time on a dejected Zashiki and her ride-or-die friend Nobusuma, before engaging with a familiar puzzle. A sliding ice floor. Look, if I have to chase after someone I definitively beat through a side dungeon just to get my reward, I'm a bounce. That region being good is a psyop, by the way. No doubt angering anyone who can solve that joke, Yamachichi decides to pipe up when Hakonen exits the caves. He's close to Nobusuma's territory. Why this is relevant, besides being self-evident, is that Nobu is Yama's little sister. Well, one thing runs in the family, and it isn't smarts. Count that too, as before Hakonen can square up to Nobusuma, she makes him run a maze in utter darkness. Presumably tired from wandering around in the dark and correctly assuming that Nobusuma isn't going anywhere, Hakonen opts to rest before testing his endurance against the... Oh, come on! That isn't even Furname!
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
6. Not content with getting wet and sticky last night, Hakonen deals with Nobusuma promptly to end this familial feud. Fitting that a leech teaches him how to absorb energy out of the mountain spirit geysers. In the depths of the cave, Hakonen finally reaches Tsukumo's residency. A high-tech lab that I wonder how a certain other scientist would judge. As I can recall, science might as well be magic if you don't understand it. But before Tsukumo deems Hakonen worthy of personal inspection, he'll have to run a few tests under the supervision of an Ashimi. Bing bang bam boom, he passes with flying colors, improving his memory to boot, no thanks to Sister Kitsune, who somehow got roped into Tsukumo's plan. But right after besting Ashimi, a peculiar feeling rushes all throughout Hakonen. His energy is, seeping out. Of all of the people to be right. Pushing that aside, Hakonen continues on this linear sequence of scares right into another fireside chat with Magatsu. On the docket, Magatsu and Tsukumo's friendship. The cause for their falling out wasn't Hakonen, but it does involve humans. Seems the elder and vice elder had differing viewpoints, though it is obvious the two regret the current state of affairs. Tsukumo's yapping about the hip new formats of .mp4 and .png to a confused Magatsu notwithstanding. Granted, if Magatsu's questionnaires are anything to go by, the Oni and Spider were made for each other. Much like the teacher and student, the two splitting off to their respective objectives. Entering Tsukumo's nest, one thing is made quite clear to Hakonen. Spider is a right proper hikikomori. As I contemplate if I have enough strength of will to fix her, Hakonen tries to get right down to brass tacks, but Tsukumo cuts him off. She needs his help. The Spider has pinpointed a location that interests Daime Yokai enough to put up a barrier, another one of Tsukumo's labs. South Lab, as I'll call it. There was an Ashimi station there, but all is gone quiet. Not wanting to risk a data breach, Tsukumo wants Hakonen to recover the memory disk of the Ashimi. It seems simple, but as Hakonen finds out, South Lab is a wreck, and the Ashimi I'll dub Ashi to differentiate her from the others is running on fumes. Emergency repairs are needed as Hakonen is unwilling to destroy Ashi. Thankfully, she walks him through the process, though a couple of components are needed from South Lab to begin the procedure. Snooping around brings its own revelations, the manual needed to run diagnostics on Ashi sheltered amongst a diary entries. From chronological order, Tsukumo is an outsider. She isn't a native to Maharoba, yet Magatsu and Shiraha welcomed her anyway, in spite of the Spider's introvertedness and odd behaviors. To perhaps cope with that, Tsukumo found solace in Magatsu, who humored the nutty professor and her wacky inventions. Thus, the first generation of Ashimis were created, the original model becoming a daughter to the Spider, who she... Let's throw a softball and say mistakes were made. Parenthood isn't easy no matter if you're a human or yokai. Running parallel to this, Tsukumo found out that Shiraha had grown unstable. Whatever that means. This chain of events would ultimately lead to a schism between the three, though it is noted by Tsukumo that whatever broke them up, she thought about it pragmatically. A sort of lesser of two evils, where I'm assuming Magatsu preferred to derail the trolley. Oh, and completely unrelated, Tsukumo has been tinkering with a space-time communication device. Honda told her to fuck off, the name Asimo a registered trademark, thus Ashimi. Continuing with the search uncovers more details about Maharoba, particularly Tsukumo's want and need to catalog everything in the form of mock-ups. What do you mean this is Shiraha's 12th form? Or video recordings. One fateful winter 10 years ago, Tsukumo had found a human girl lost and alone near what is current-day Nobusuma's region. Calling forth Magatsu and Sister Kitsune, who we'll later find out is ranked third on the mountain's hierarchy, the three deliberated on what to do. Per the girl's words, she was separated from her family while they were looking for food. Nothing more, nothing less. Ordering SK to send her back home with a bundle of fish and meat, the matter was resolved. But something doesn't add up. Without the full picture, though, all we, and by extension Hakonen and Yamachichi, can do is speculate. At least Ashi can be repaired. After a bit of energy donation. This routine is starting to annoy Hakonen. All this back and forward. He can't take it no more. Neither can his body, his energy sloughing off without the need of a yokai's caress. Great. So even if Hakonen does the right thing, something Yamachichi praises him for when it came to rescuing Ashi, He's still punished. The Karakuri's memory disk recovered and suffering a presumed sleepless night, Seven takes Hakonen back to Tsukumo to deliver the goods. Turns out Ashi is the original Ashimi, so no wonder Tsukumo wanted Hakonen to check up on her. But as the memory disk needs a bit of deciphering, the spider sends the apprentice out on another errand. Weapon procurement. Tsukumo has developed a few non-lethal weapons, though one, the Kandata, has been misplaced as of late. Stolen. A Kitsune having auctioned it off to a racing tournament as the grand prize. As the best runner in Maharoba, Hakonen is a shoo-in. Nobusuma handed a second defeat by the former monk's hands. Feet. Returning what was rightfully hers, Hakonen is lazily baited into accepting the easy route, but his discerning eyes see right through Tsukumo's ruse. He'll only prove to be her equal if he bests her in a test of endurance. And while it's a bit touch and go, Hakonen outlasts Tsukumo's stamina, and with Ashi's help, powers down the Spider's elite Ashimi hit squad. It's through all this that Tsukumo recognizes, sappy as it is, the importance of friendship and cooperation. Yep, absolutely meant for each other. The two friends catching up, Hakonen is escorted home by Ashy, the damaged doll gifting him a disc containing the rest of the video he saw at South Lab. Yeah, I knew it was too convenient that the girl's parents lost her while searching around Maharoba for food. But to twist her foot in such a way so that she can't walk, and to tell her that she should die for the sake of her family, that's the peak of human cruelty. While Sister Kitsune tends to the girl, Magatsu and Tsukumo try to reason out a plan that Shiraha simply sidesteps. If she'll die as a human, the girl will live as a yokai. But to force that upon someone at their lowest, refusing to tackle the root of the issue and essentially taking away their autonomy by offering up false hope, that ain't right either. Magatsu knows that, Shiraha's delusional, and Tsukumo was pragmatic. Damn, Mizuki. No wonder you turned out the way that you did. Best to visit Mother and see what Hakonen can do. While he and Yamachichi head off towards Shiraha's realm, Tsukumo concludes her findings to Magatsu. Daimyokai's plan involves the serpent. A few variables still aren't solved though, the skull the biggest one, leaving Magatsu to ask around for more info. Right as she makes her exit, Azuki appears unannounced to practically bitch at her godmother for her supposed weakness, despite the spider wishing to apologize for her past screw-ups, both in regards to her treatment of humans and not rectifying the internal struggle within Azuki before it completely soured. Of course, the hybrid doesn't want to hear any of this and vanishes. Shiraha will need to answer for the stain she left on the sniper, Hakonen reaching her area after navigating a false bridge trap. While warned of the instability of the region, entering Shiraha's... There's no way. A human village? On Maharoba? Hakonen can't believe it, his dream realized, but closer inspection reveals an underlying insidiousness to the whole affair. Yotun Village might as well be a set. A trial in and of itself, Shiraha the prime asset. All the townsfolk follow a religion centered around the serpent and the worship of yokai, considered the mother goddess and her angels respectively. The extent of the subjugation is unveiled to Hakonen when he attempts to brute force his way into a meeting with the village chief. Followers and non-believers service the goddess mother in body and spirit. Will we get to 10? Maybe. Paying closer attention to the drivel spouted by the Hollow people, Hakonen worms his way towards the chief, earning the right to see and undergo Shiraha's trial, but not before witnessing more of the imbalance in Yotun. With yokai put on a pedestal, they're free to effectively coerce any human under the banner of spiritual guidance. It leaves a bad taste in both Hakonen and Yamachichi's mouths. The former, as this isn't coexistence, the latter because she picks up on the oddity of the whole place. These humans and yokai are akin to dolls, mannequins that dress up a stage. That becomes wholly apparent after Hakonen has another run-in with Sister Kitsune in the yokai tenements of Yotun, his eyes trained to pierce illusions. Where Shiraha thinks an entire village is worshipping her presence, Hakonen sees ruin and dilapidation. The snake goddess is trapped in her own mind, a victim of her existence as a yokai born from humanity, a waking nightmare of the better times when there was a flock to tend to and protect. While not in the mental capacity for reconciliation, Shiraha is still a target of dying yokai, Magatsu wanting Hakonen to try and convince the snake to stay with the Onion spider in the attempt to protect her. Shiraha can't ignore the pleas of a human, the race that born her into reality, explaining why she latched onto Azuki, if regrettably passing down her worst traits to the hybrid. Proving his worth, Hakonen passes Shiraha's trial, earning his spot, in the snake's eyes, as a high-ranking member of her religion, exempting him from mandatory donation. He's not considered her equal, so it's not ideal, but for the sake of earning a spot in Maharoba, it will work for the apprentice. Azuki tries to play spoilsport, stressing that Hakonen is taking advantage of Shiraha's condition, but this prompts Tsukumo to leave her lab for once and attempt to explain that the snake is in grave danger. The hubbub and confusion is the opening that Daimyo Kai needed. Struck with the cursed arrow, what little sanity left in Shiraha disappears, leaving only a voracious snake in its place. It takes the combined effort of Magatsu and Tsukumo to trap Shiraha in place, not as a last resort, but to create an opportunity for Hakonen and Yamachichi to enter the Serpent's spirit world. We would call it a mind palace. The inner machinations of Shiraha's mind are chaotic and messy, blending between happy memories and her innermost doubts. From her time as a simple beast that swallowed all its enemies, to her ascension as a mother protector to humanity, to a failed goddess unable to rescue her followers from an epidemic, to her second chance with Azuki. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Silencing the rampaging fragments of Shiraha's ego, her heart is laid bare. The high priestess to Shiraha, her utmost devout follower, rebuke the serpent as nothing more than a false goddess, a powerless snake incapable of preventing the wrath of God. From the priestess's suicide, a grudge. Self-hating and corrupting, it has eaten away Shiraha, leaving her afraid and unwilling to confront it. It, too, tries to bring down Hakonen and Yamachichi, donning the guise of Magatsu to critique his pipe dream of seeing humans and yokai together as equals, a fear he's had to grapple with from time to time. But he's not afraid of this confrontation, spearing Shiraha's consciousness to join the fray and silence the grudge with the combined effort of the seals and Yamachichi's ninpo. In a last-ditch effort, the Grudge throws a Hail Mary, the retainer employing her body as a shield to protect her master. On the cusp of death, Hakonen harnesses the energy within his body and expels it, healing Yamachichi. It seems the Soul Scatter technique, as Shiraha's consciousness puts it, is the foundation from which all sorcery is derived. Humans naturally have their magic circuits closed, though repeated interactions with yokai can awaken them. What indirect methods of teaching Magatsu has? Or would that be direct, actually? Crisis averted and earning the acknowledgement of inner Shiraha, who pleads to Hakonen to extend his grace to her daughter, all that's left is Daime Yokai and Azuki. But that's a problem for tomorrow, the night long, and Hakonen earning himself a breather. Those two on the mind, it seems the exorcist has taken the sniper to the red light district underneath the mountain, the smell of humans masking the two scent. And being the good deceiver she is, Daime Yokai preys on Azuki's human emotions of hatred and jealousy, the two forming a partnership of convenience to take down Hakonen and the rest of Maharoba. Night 9 sees the sorcerer reacclimated to the seedier side of his new home, Japan's #1 destination for fleshy delight. Well, unless your name is Sakumo, whose ban from the premises prevents her from joining the search for Azuki. If you're wondering, Magatsu was the one who came up with the idea of the red light district. Neutral territory where humans and yokai could fulfill any needs they might have without stigma. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a step. Getting the lay of the land invokes this to Hakonen, witnessing humans and yokai going on about their foibles and proclivities without so much as a worry. He does get solicited by a pair of Akaname, who Yamachichi tries to scare off to no avail, but nothing's more frightening than a gunshot. Someone's a bit angsty and listened to break stuff a bit too much, but Hakonen reverse psychologies Azuki's need to prove her superiority into a duel. Sadly, the staging grounds for the battle are on the far side of a certain bathhouse, which is outside the district's purview. It's a separate location cordoned off. Hakonen will need a pass to be let through, the apprentice and retainer playing gopher to the RLD's association. At least the two can blow off some steam together. Give it up for Night 10! Night 10! On the pathway to the bathhouse, construction and security causes some blockages for Hakonen and Yamachichi, though the retainer has done her research into Soul Scatter, pointing out that her master can harness his energy into a spirit gun of sorts. It proves to be useful both in entering the Akaname establishment and dealing with Daime Yokai, her plan to absorb the mountain's ley line foiled by Hakonen drowning her body in excess energy.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
I know how that sounds. Magatsu sequestering a now chickenified daimyokai, all that leaves is Azuki for Hakonen to defeat, or it would if the main attraction of the bathhouse didn't think now was the best time to test her luck again. A promise was made, though like before, Zashiki is left a loser. Promising still to be the one to defeat Hakonen, their friendly rivalry solidified. This long journey finally coming to a close, Hakonen beseeches Yamachichi that he must face Azuki alone. Her will versus his. No outside interference, nothing. While hesitant over the danger that puts her master in, Yamachichi understands and leaves Hakonen to the lonely climb up to the peak of Dragontorn Rift, where Azuki lie in wait. Mano a mano, the long and arduous contest sparked on by the hybrid's distaste for humanity has her accept that half, knowing that it brought someone like Hakonen to blows with her. With that, the two finally come home. It'll take some time before the curse is properly undone, but from there, it'll be Azuki's choice to decide what to do. A couple days go by, Hakonen enjoying the fruit of his labors, the yokai of Maharoba having fixed up the homestead, and the Akaname of the bathhouse having opened up a VIP hot spring for him. But Chicken Claw doesn't have a permanent duration. Biding her time and happenstance teleporting someone full of energy into her cell, Daime Yokai breaks free and encloses the whole of the mountain in a peculiar dome. It saps the life force out of yokai, but thankfully Hakonen and Azuki, aren't. What's fueling the barrier is Maharoba's ley line, Azuki doing her best to sabotage the magic squares keeping it up, while Hakonen gets the lion's share of the task, distracting a powered-up Daime Yokai, newly titled Kyo Daime Yokai, so that she doesn't pester the hybrid. The enemies turned allies work surprisingly well, all things considered, as when Azuki finishes up and Hakonen corners a depowered Daime Yokai in the ritual room, the apprentice and sniper, through the combined effort of their abilities, detain the exorcist. The erratic flow of energy does destabilize the whole mountain, causing a cave-in, sending Hakonin tumbling towards his doom, but with quick thinking, Azuki catches him and uses the Kandata gun to fire a string upwards so that all the residents of the mountain can hoist the two out of their predicament. Our story ends with summer's heat welcoming the season on Maharoba, bringing with it an intolerable need for closeness, from a student to his teacher, and a hunter to her prey. Obviously, Three Charms R is a continuation that upholds many ideas that its predecessor introduced. This is still a story about coexistence, focused mostly on what the inclusion of Hakonen has done to the state of Maharoba Mountain, but whereas Three Charms had a heavier emphasis on the broad back and forth between humans and yokai, our two leads serving as the focal points, R dips its toes into the inner workings of said sides, particularly with Azuki and Shiraha being put into the spotlight as the yokai representatives, and Hakonen's training taking up the human half. At first, R kinda seems like it'll be more slice of life shenanigans, especially because Hakonen is no longer in any notable danger, as he was during his first mountain climbing adventure. Indeed, while he was attacked by yokai, they lacked a certain animosity, so to speak. You'll have to be a bit lenient with me in the universe this trilogy takes place in. SA is a special kind of evil regardless of who it is done to. H-game logic and whatnot, which is a whole nother can of worms. A framing frame for my Payday 2 fans. We know that besides Magatsu, who wanted to test Hakonen's beliefs from square one, the rest of the yokai, Bride Fox, Yamachichi, and Funame, wanted to repay the apprentice's kindness in the only way they knew how. Thus, a dilemma is made due to that cultural and species difference. Hakonen's month on the mountain leaves him far more open with his emotions and accepting of the peculiarities of yokai society and R, having banter with the variety he meets, and generally accepting the consequences of his mostly optional defeats. He does stay in a home that is obliquely a trap house, not really being proactive in preventing night crawling. Something he is warned of time and time again, yet openly lets happen. Something he actively engages in with Magatsu come the end of the adventure, serving as this indication of influence. It's a two-way street, a back-and-forth common to two cultures in close proximity that subsume into a united one. Sorcery becomes this communion, a gift that can either be taken in vain and desecrated like with Daime Yokai, or can be appreciated and applied to better the whole, Hakonen. Zashiki's whole existence is a massive finger pointing at this dichotomy, seeing as she is the yokai equivalent of our former monk with about the same trajectory. Emotionally driven and highly talented, doubtful of themselves and needing others to reassure their abilities. They end up fostering the competitively respectful thorns in each other's sides, both standing tall under their shared belief of never giving up, even when one triumphs over the other. Without Hakonen's drive motivating her craft, I doubt Zashiki would have made it to the big leagues, and without her to confront his views, albeit as a soft reflection of himself, Hakonen wouldn't have had the resolution to tackle Azuki. To return back to the apprentice and his growth, my reading of the room in the red light district is wholly tied to this change in Hakonen's attitude when interacting with the residents of the mountain. While the motivation to lay with Yamachichi previously was due to Daime Yokai's yokai killing breath, emphasizing the apprentice's good Samaritan nature, which ultimately led to the master and servant pouring their hearts out for the other, the stakes in the hotel are considerably less dire, and light is made of how easily the two could have coerced the manager into letting them out, but they chose not to. While it is spur of the moment, there's an acceptance Hakonen demonstrates when deciding to play by the rules. When in yokai Rome and you've already acknowledged your traveling partner as someone you deeply care for. However, this scene also correlates to a few others, particularly because of where it is placed in the narrative. There is a recurring line, or phrase, if I may paraphrase, that is used predominantly between Azuki and Shiraha's lost sequences that humans, in the face of total oblivion, go into this fight or flight mode, a self-defense mechanism that tries to ensure a legacy is created. Basically, self-preservation on a genealogical scale. When Hakonen and Yamachichi get trapped in the hotel room, think about the events that have led up to that moment. This is right after the duo ventured into the shattered memories of the snake goddess, memories that depicted extremely unflattering exchanges between humans and yokai, whether it be Shiraha's gluttony devouring the less capable, or her high priestess tearing down the very essence of the snake. Not harrowing enough for you, Yamachichi almost dies in the process, Hakonen's soul scatter ability the singular measure keeping her from bleeding out in the middle of null space. On top of that, going into the red light district meant facing off against Daime Yokai, who had gods know what in store, and an Azuki fueled by her anger and hate. This is dangerous scenario after next. There needed to be a breaking point, and I think the room gave the two an excuse to act on their shared feelings that we know they have from the first game, as well as serve as confirmation that the two were still alive. That despite all the horrors they had seen before of how easily the balance could be tipped in someone's ill favor, they agreed on the matter together. One wasn't encroaching on the other. Despite the notable difference in strength, playfully pointed at earlier in the main hall of the district, where it's highlighted that Hakonen is on the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to physical prowess, I think Shiraha and Azuki are correct in their statement. Humans do nutty things when they brush up against death. I also believe it applies to more than just humanity. Couldn't you describe Azuki succumbing to the curse or Shiraha's mental degradation as a reaction to death? Metaphorically, yes, as opposed to physical, but both had everything ripped away from them or perceived such an event occurring and reacted understandably rash. And strangely enough, this sex and death parallel doesn't just stop at Yamachichi. I've mentioned Azuki, but the damaged Ashimi also plays with this idea as well. With the latter, it's far more apparent and on the nose since she's literally on the cusp of shutting down. Her last action before that occurs, getting Hakonen to raw dog her in an attempt to reboot her systems. The former, meanwhile, points out Hakonen's NRB that he acquired mid-fall when she catches him, and there's her lost scenes that bring that to attention. Does this go anywhere? Well, kinda. The circle of life and death is no different between humans and yokai, strengthening that innate connection between the two species. We all find these simple joys in life, be it through fraternal, maternal, platonic, or romantic relationships. In the same vein, we fear death, whether biologically speaking as humans grow old and die, or metaphorically as yokai fade into obscurity. That's the capstone on Shiraha. She knows she'll die, and that terrifies her. It's a process that can't be stopped. Thus her blatant need to be a mother, whether to a human, yokai, or something in between. It proves that she existed and mattered to someone. I don't have to tell you how deeply human that is. It's why I think Azuki lets the curse overtake her. She believes Hakonen had turned everyone she knew against her, leaving her with nothing except to die. This definitely touches on the gun Tony Noni's belief in strength, of how the supposed strong cannot show weakness, otherwise that means they are lesser despite emotional turbulence being natural to all sapient things. I feel like this analysis is a bit messy and jumping all over the place compared to Three Charms, as I've gone from going over Hakonen's growth to mentioning how humans and yokai influence each other, a topic I'll return to later due to its importance to Shiraha, to this sub-theme that is made note throughout the runtime, but that hopefully conveys the multitude of moving parts R has, contributing to some of its flaws. Okay, I have to say this now, otherwise it'll bug me forever. If you've ever read, watched, or played anything that has an ensemble cast, these problems might seem familiar. For me, I think of Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc as R shares the same lack of clarity of who it wants to put out on the center stage until it gets to the important plot beats. Not wheel spinning per se, but I can see why someone would throw that out there. For those who want a topical comment, as Dan just released his duo of videos on the subject as of the time of writing this observation, it's like watching Beast Game Season 2 and realizing, oh, they're the ones who'll get all the screen time. Of the returning 5, only Magatsu, Yamachichi, and Daime Yokai have any skin in the game, and even that is variable. Less even third split if the amount of fireside chats I summarized didn't clue you in. Anywho, as Magatsu is a character with stuff to do, there's some throwaway line that Bride Fox has hiked up to the trial grounds to test Hakonen under the guidance of the Oni, and Furnami gets roped into an almost murder, but that's all the relevance they get. the plot has nothing else lined up for them besides showing up in the background of a few scenes, which is a shame because of how involved Magatsu and especially Yamachichi are in the apprentice's training. Dare say, the Leech Ninja ends up taking the deuteragonist role away from the Oni, leading to quite a bit of development between the Master and Retainer, at the cost of Magatsu having a more silent and sporadic mentorship. If you want to know why I like Yamachichi so much as a character, R cements the bit of teasing we got from Three Charms' conclusion both in main and post. To me, the hotel room lockup hookup is one of the definitive moments of R next to all the stuff of Izuki and Shiraha, a masterclass of interweaving character details with plot relevance. This is R's version of Hakonen and Magatsu's first night. What hurts is that there's no equivalent moment for a number of the Fab Four that I can praise like I do with Hakonen and Yamachichi's one-on-one. Daime Yokai shockingly makes good. No, that word doesn't work. She solidifies her despicableness and greed by not just brainwashing Hakonen into doing her bidding, setting up for Shiraha's eventual crash out, allowing the Exorcist to construct the barrier later, but also makes good on her promise from the dream. Daime Yokai still can't internalize why Hakonen chose Magatsu, even after getting her upgrade as Kyo Daime Yokai. Her personality reeks and is skin deep, her notion of humans helping humans, a smokescreen to further her aims. She's exactly the kind of human someone like Izuki claims all of us to be, a worm with no backbone. And like before, Daime Yokai puts herself above yokai, yet she still debases herself like one when escaping her cell, using the exact same term of endearment we saw used by one of the Kitsune prostitutes. Except there, you could tell the fox was smitten with her John and vice versa, the backdrop of the paid encounter giving way to an exchange of contact details. Back to the rest of the Three Charms cast, best we get is that one of the rewards for completing both main and post-game scenarios is that Magatsu gets nightcrawled by Hakonen, which is sweet and helps convey how like-minded the teacher and student are, alongside showcasing how the yokai are influenced the apprentice to be a bit more open in his advances with the ones he has romantic feelings for. It is a little tinged by payback since Nightcrawl 2 seems you've seen one where Magatsu snuck in, but in a cheeky manner akin to how the opening scene between the human and Oni is. You can't say to me that Magatsu and Hakonen don't have a GFD agreement or CNC contract somewhere. Certified freaks 7 days a week, those two. But then, Franami and Bride Fox are left high and dry, only having their optional losses to expand upon their relations with Hakonen, and they're comparatively bare not just to those who have the story's consideration in mind, but also to their previous outings. On average, the amount of snoo we got for the four yokai during what I called their canonical rendezvous was about 15 to 20 minutes per scene, a minimum of 2, which allowed set dressing to be, well, set. Here, Franami and Bride Fox have about half that time to work with, so their losses read as more generic, which is a problem overall, not only when Hakonen loses. I can think about 2 or 3 characters that have something notable happen when you're beaten, and surprise, they're all central characters, but with the night crawling as well. If you want the biggest non-verbal tell of where they stand, all but 2 night crawls use the loss music track as opposed to Magatsu's theme. And wouldn't you know, it's Magatsu and Izuki's NC that use the latter. Rubbing salt straight in, a 2/3 majority of the night crawls are with named characters, so there could have been some cross-pollination akin to the post-game scenes of Three Charms, but there isn't. Others aren't, like with the one-off Kodama, Akaname, and Kitsune, which I find harder to justify their inclusion outside of a gameplay purpose and R being an H game. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, it just stings as we have had our cake and eaten it too. Titillation and intrigue. A match made in heaven! This will definitely mess with my tier list if you're wondering on screen now. Moving on to the new gen, the trio of Izuki, Sakumo, and Shiraha are all realized, but then you have Princess Kodama, who's so blinking you'll miss her, Nobusuma, who's left holding the bag of wasted potential, and Zashiki, who, while given the most to do out of the newly introduced side characters in the cast, still disappears for 3/4 of the story after it seems like her problem is solved. The concluding fist fight with Daime Yokai is built off the back that it was all these interactions Hakonen had with everyone that allows him to triumph over the tiny tyrant, since he uses the skills he learned from them alongside Azuki's sharpshooting to counteract Daime Yokai's abilities, leading into all the yokai catching him as he plummets down into the mines. But there's not enough gravitas to it, as some of them he only spent about 30 minutes with. I don't know what is worse, having a predefined subset of characters and giving them nothing to do, or introducing a newer group and giving them nothing to do. The root problem is still missing opportunities to expand on the cast we know and love while folding more into the fray, but I'd be hard-pressed to say who gets it worse. Yeah, you heard that right. Daime Yokai takes up the main villain billing again, but I just don't feel that it's earned. Since she was shrouded in mystery up until the near end of Three Charms, her being the complete opposite of what Hakonen would want in a teacher works and helps her take the incidental bad guy position. Incidental as Three Charms hardly needed an antagonist. Here, it feels like a better, easier to take seriously one with a closer connection to the theme of the game gets sidelined so that Daime Yokai can be the be-all, end-all. The yokai hunter serving as a corrupting influence or bad actor behind the scenes fits her personality, but when it comes to making her the top guy again, I don't know, I just don't buy it. Even when she goes Daime Yokai, I can't see her as a legitimate challenge for Hakonen to overcome. He's already done it before, leading to this transparently feeling like a retread from Three Charms, but with none of what made the reveal work. You know who's gotten the biggest glow up? Sister Kitsune, who spent the majority of Three Charms as a gag character at the expense of the player. She's the one who gave hints or allowed you to skip whole swaths of areas at the cost of your health stats, running out leading to one of her scenes. Despite her rowdy reputation, Sister Kitsune is seen goading Hakonen as she's wont to do, and is the main backer of the Red Lights New District. When the chips are down, she is a good person on the inside. It's an earned nickname I still call her by. Oh yeah, I was going over the former monk before I went on this long-winded set of examinations. Let's re-rail. To round off Hakonen's openness of all that I've said before doesn't speak volumes, the few fireside chats that Magatsu has with the former monk this time has him basically pick a favorite of who he went up in an area, the Oni providing some hilarious commentary based on the choice. While definitely wanting to get a rise out of her disciple, Magatsu is ever the teaser, there's the hint of playful jealousy as if Hakonen's teacher is wanting to pinpoint his likes so that she can leave him more winded than he already is with her. But this also highlights how comfortable Magatsu's apprentice is with her. Hakonen doesn't try to deny his thoughts or emotions anymore, whether they be positive or negative. It's his insistence to Magatsu to take training seriously, which demonstrates his lack of knowledge surrounding sorcery, that kicks off the story altogether. There's an implicit and explicit trust between the two, noticeable when they have their goofy little conversations, or during the serious moments, especially with the latter. Magatsu's first thought after witnessing the aftermath of Hakonen's assault from Azuki, Tsukumo, and Shiraha is to go give them a reckoning, but Hakonen stops her by using yokai logic. If strength is what is important, as it is the rule of the mountain, the apprentice will show them his force of will. While it is a shared problem on both a broad and personal front, Hakonen is the sticking point that must prove himself and his ideals, and Magatsu knows that. It's why Shiraha's grudge uses Magatsu's visage to emotionally torment Hakonen. Whether he believes it or not, there will always be some lingering doubt in Hakonen's mind that will think he will never be strong enough to turn his dream into reality. The mushy lovemaking he has with Magatsu brutally recontextualized as a quagmire he'll never escape from. A scene set up to lull you into what you think will be a low-stakes story, as it's decidedly wholesome in the way these student-teacher scenes are. And because this was before he learned the truth of what happens when a human interacts with yokai for long enough, that being they become more attuned to spiritual energy, thus allowing the use of sorcery, other forms of magic, and generally helping yokai in a far more direct manner. I've already mentioned Soul Scatter resuscitating Yamachichi. Hakonen sees it as the worst case scenario. He'll never be the one to bridge the gap if he becomes a plaything to yokai, which is basically what happens in a number of the bad endings from the first 3 charms, and that there is a defined relationship between humans and yokai that can never be changed. One of victors and losers, strong and weak, us and them. It darkly justifies what Hakonen's father did, what Daime Yokai is trying to do, how Azuki carries herself, which outright terrifies the apprentice. However, this is once again Hakonen undercutting himself, a flaw that has cropped up numerous times in his life, his brain a big ol' ball of doubt that has a hard time giving himself credit. What makes Hakonen strong isn't that he's this master-level sorcerer who can snap mountains in twain, or dry rivers with a thought. Say it with me now, it's the indomitableness of his human spirit. He doesn't lie down like a dog when beaten into a corner. Hakonen gets back up, dusts himself off, and tries again, for as many tries as it takes. And that's not even getting started when it comes to correcting injustices, regardless if the one in need is human, yokai, or something in between. Hakonen never takes the easy path, whether by a shot in the dark, a simple handshake, or by locking the problem away. There was once someone else like that who I spoke fondly of, an infernal machine of a man that didn't know when to quit. This all seems run-of-the-mill of the first game. It's literally a reframing of TC's through line, but that's what makes Azuki such a distortion to what we have seen before. Canonically, as in the story doesn't happen without this event and you can't prevent it gameplay-wise, she rapes Hakonen, and it's played pretty straight, all things considered, both in-game and from the player experience. Countless yokai before and after this point have wanted to shag Hakonen for many reasons, running aground 3 different lines of thought that sometimes collide with another. There's an emotional attachment, like with the original 4, to test his mettle, the new teachers, or drain him of energy, physiological. I don't have to speak about the first aspect. Why do people in love make it? I'll never know. But with the 2 others, there's an unspoken agreement that interactions with yokai will lead to outcomes of the come out variety. While they'll be flaunting, gloating, all kinds of sore winter talk if you do fall to one, a yokai doesn't try to break your spirit. Okay, kill your self-worth. With some minor exceptions. Yeah, no, I don't get the foxes right outside Shiraha's domain either. That may have been a byproduct of the oil, since it is stated that it fries the mind with prolonged contact, and they simply attached themselves to the thought and ran with it since Hakonen lured himself to their level. The throes of passion can bring about strange sides. They, as in yokai, don't make you feel bad except when it's the morning after and you have to figure out how to get home with bruised hips and a broken pelvis. To give a thought presumably under their line of thinking, what good would it do to belittle someone who could become a regular unless they're really into that? Here's your ticket to a certain bathhouse. And in the instance you want to be with a yokai, they'll be all over you. I hope you don't like having personal space. That's what makes Azuki's out-and-out belligerence stick out like a sore thumb in standalone and comparison. Keeping it simple for the time, as our gun-toting Oni has oodles of baggage. Her incessant need to put down Hakonen, scoring both their initial scene as well as her lost sequences, doesn't match up with what we know about yokai. As I said in the previous video on the series, the species are a bunch of free-spirited partiers who aren't the killing type, whether it be your life or the mood. I guess, go along to get along? It's the hint that something is up with Azuki, whether from experience, nurture, or some other third thing. Spoiler, it's all 3. The emphasis is on the idea of strength, how naturally weaker humans are to yokai, thus that should make them subservient. But what stuck out to me more in the moment is how the impromptu audience reacts. Shiraha is all rah-rah, give it to Hakonen, while Tsukumo remains silent, almost embarrassed by what she is watching. That immediately casts the trio as dysfunctional, 2-1, which carries over to their encounters. Rewinding a little before this, when Tsukumo has Hakonen all tied up, the spider yokai has that enthusiasm we're accustomed to with yokai. She literally does the catch and release routine, her fun spoiled by a bullet. And painful memories. Azuki is living proof that no one rides a high horse. For all our claims of civility or superiority, fucking up is a universal concept. Nobody is immune. Azuki is the child of abandonment and loss, discrimination and lionization, loneliness and self-loathing. She is a victim of both humans and yokai, a symbol of their generational trauma against themselves and each other, made manifest that will continue to fester and rot until it is confronted or killed. An all-consuming grudge wrapped in flesh and blood. Worryingly, I don't have an answer. How could I have an answer? What sense am I supposed to make from Azuki's parents leaving her to freeze on the mountain? It's inhumane, deeply troubling, and indicative of how humanity puts on a front of courtesy before unmasking the monster below. Undesirable is a word with close ties to our roots, in some form or another. Tacked onto people in some form or another. And always when it's convenient so the herd doesn't notice the culling of the quote-unquote weak. For Azuki the human, it was lose-lose. Either die of starvation due to the low crop yield the village had, or get picked off by nature's wrath in the wilderness. Life is cruel and you have to be strong, a lesson the now adult Azuki has taken to heart. Funny how it is that she seemingly brings up food a number of times, especially during her scenes, mentioning ideas like, it's always best to eat right after the kill. That day never left her, and how could it? You wake up in the morning and look into the mirror only to be reminded of that night in the snow, when everything changed. I don't have an answer. I can't give one. Do you let someone die or irrevocably change them so they can survive? How does one come to terms with who they were versus what they are? At what point do you get devoured by the hydra of transhumanism? That's the core dilemma between Magatsu, Tsukumo, Shiraha, and Azuki. I very much stand with Magatsu in the matter, recognizing how hopeless this all is. She had the foresight if Azuki was transformed into a yokai without consideration, that wouldn't rectify the problem, merely introduce more into an already boiling pot. It would foster an internalized speciesism towards humans, unfairly treating them as all the same, while glorifying yokai as something superior. It would create a disconnect between the persona and shadow, sending self-loathing an invitation to stay. Azuki can't be a weak human. They were the ones who abandoned her on the mountain. They were the ones bound to the laws of nature. She's a yokai, exceptional and effervescent, despite them being just as liable to mistakes and misgivings. There was a care for Azuki's well-being that I believe Tsukumo did not initially have. Indifference would have been her sin, showing enough empathy to not want someone to die, but leaving herself personally uninvested in how this situation would pan out. The professor saw Shiraha's meddling as a simple solution to a complex problem. Tsukumo's role of godparent nominal in the event that Shiraha went berserk, but due to Magatsu's reaction to this detachment, her best friend on Maharoba, if you need reminding, a little crack formed within the spider scientist. Did she do the right thing? In the moment, I don't have the authority to say. In the aftermath, I would say no. She wasn't involved with Azuki as she should have been, and I think Tsukumo recognizes that not only through her relationship with the Ashimis, who the professor comes to see as her daughters, especially with the original model who's left cold, abandoned, and on the verge of shutdown in South Lab. Gee, I wonder who I might be referring to, but with Hakonen who gets her to be more open. Verbatim, she tells Hakonen before the trial starts that you shouldn't settle on something as shallow as a handshake to mean you know someone. To me, a lamentation of how her relationships have gone. Tsukumo knows the pain that Azuki went through, yet didn't even attempt to work those issues out with the hybrid, instead defaulting to Shiraha, who the spider knew was unstable. Tsukumo's closest friendship is with Magatsu, the two having somewhat similar if notably divergent viewpoints, yet the spider's stubbornness drives a wedge between the two. In all honesty, compared to the shitstorm of Azuki and Shiraha, Magatsu and Tsukumo's spat is small potatoes, a valley if Mr. Walnuts is to be believed, born out of the larger problem that is the snake goddess. I can give an answer. Shiraha was the worst person to give to Azuki to, but not because Shiraha meant harm. There's no better way to describe the goddess as broken, her unwittingly kicking the can of her issues down to Azuki, another example of generational trauma seeping to the forefront, of how combative the human-yokai divide can be, despite both sides coming from the same place and dealing with similar hang-ups. Shiraha's nature is a yokai born into this world by humans, a tulpa-turned-goddess that could guide and protect her flock when the time called for it. She needed them to give her purpose, and they needed her for the protection she gave. But an ideal world this isn't. This is Shiraha's 12th incarnation, molded into place by her surroundings, by how she was nurtured. Because she is a yokai of human emotion, and what are we, if I may excuse the use of a quote, but not monuments of order built by bricks of chaos? That rampant hunger and lust, the inner turmoil and gnawing fear, the elevated sense of pride right before the fall. Are those not elements of the human psyche in the same way loyalty, selflessness, and compassion are? Aren't yokai a mere reflection of us? We claim to be masters of the environment, the pinnacle of evolution, but we all die the same. That's what leaves Shiraha truly powerless, the grudge sworn at the false goddess for not preventing the plague sworn at the weaknesses and incapabilities of the living. She was damned in the same way someone damns God for a tragedy, as if accountability and sheer randomness aren't factors of life. But no matter, that complete rejection from the one who loved her the most shattered Shiraha. All she can do is live in a fantasy world where she is that goddess, fulfilling her obligations to the applause of silence. All of what made Shiraha this benevolent figure became twisted and malformed past the point of recognition. The love that we, meaning humans and yokai, are capable of mutated into this domineering presence that sees itself above all. Shiraha is God, and each and every yokai is an angel to be attended to and worshipped. Perfection. Humans are either adherents to the way and know their place, or dissidents meant to be whipped into obedience. That is who is raising Azuki. A little girl thrust into being a yokai after suffering a great injustice from humanity. A young adult raised to believe the worst of others and grows jealous of those who break the mold. Everything clicks into place, like the sound of a matchlock opening fire. Three Charms R is about the evils of the world, how they permeate through inaction or willful malice, how people end up turning against each other and themselves through inside and outside factors, how tribalism cannibalizes all. But Three Charms R is about not getting suffocated under that pillow. It's about doing your best, whether big or small, to stand up to that evil, to not let it win. It isn't easy, and no one said it would be. You will trip and fall. That is an inevitability. But as long as you get back up and take one step at a time, you'll climb those stairs no matter how long it takes. And Lord willing, you might make some friends along the way to make the journey less bumpy. I've mentioned how the hookup in the hotel is a definitive scene for me in the game. I think the same when Azuki tosses Hakonen her gun. While on the surface, it's the hybrid confirming her opinion of the apprentice that, like a weak human, he doesn't have the balls to kill her right then and there. Subtextually, it's a roundabout suicide, an escape from all the pain and misery of being the outcast to end all outcasts. That despite all her boasting about how comparatively weak humans are to yokai, Azuki is covering up her weakness as a mark of shame. And I think Hakonen's intuition picked up on that. It's why he doesn't shoot her. That would be letting Azuki sink into the muck and mire, a victim of circumstances she couldn't control. It would be like letting Yamachichi fall into Dragon Rift. For the woman that he should hate, seeing as she raped him, Hakonen holds onto that compassion, knowing how damaged Azuki is, to even suggest him to shoot her. And that touches a nerve in the gun-toting Oni. Her attempts to get Hakonen to hate her falling on deaf ears, not once, but twice. Azuki used Daimyokai and vice versa, both getting something out of their arrangement near the end of the main game. Daimyokai was given time to further her plan, while Azuki was given an excuse for Hakonen to reject her. If she was stripped of all recognizable traits that made her a person, if nothing was left but hatred and jealousy, she would be no different from an animal that you either needed to avoid or put down for the safety of everyone. She would be beyond redemption, a star meant to flicker out, a singularity in a vacuum. She'd sadly be a second Shiraha, broken and left as a warning of men and yokai's folly. And while Hakonen and the others aren't able to salvage Shiraha, her delusion forever a testament to how bad things can truly get, the apprentice makes damn sure that fate doesn't befall Azuki. Misery loves company, but you shouldn't have to suffer it alone. It's why Azuki's Nightcrawl shares this pointed thought. Do we always have to be at each other's throats? Do our first impressions paint our entire relationship? Like that, Azuki dropped her guard for the first time, admitting her need, a basic need we all desire, for comfort and closure at Hakonen's doorstep. She, who was obsessed with strength, whose whole personality centers around proving that she isn't a weak human but a strong yokai, lets herself be vulnerable in this one moment. The world is cruel, but people don't have to be. The world needs a strong face to survive its hostility, but that mask is not permanent. Two-word phrase, production values. Basically, all of what I said in the previous video could be copy and pasted here, from music, though the main theme kicking in during the climactic moments is still hype as fuck, to sound, to background elements, so I won't bother repeating myself. That leaves the new additions like the increased production values and the designs of the characters to go over. You can tell there was an insistence to make R seem bigger than it being an RPG Maker title, both in the scope of the story and how its tale is presented. This goes from the smaller scale. You'll notice that the Curse Breaker formation effect is now standard across the board for whenever anyone rages out of the charms, making everything more uniform, all the way to macro. When R actually springs for cutscenes, and even during the dialogue exchanges, there's more of a willingness to sprinkle in simple animations, like during Magatsu and Shiraha's struggle, Hakonen plummeting to his almost death, and generally anything with Azuki. There's a dynamicness to her section of chase gameplay where you see her reposition based on where you're at that wasn't felt in the first game. Usually you'd have the character sprite blink into existence during a bait and switch, kinda making the chase feel staged in a way. And that's without getting into some of the visual foibles of the AI pathing. I didn't mention it, but eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed how I broke the Daimyokai section from the first game, because I don't think you're supposed to be able to retreat from her if she catches you, but I did, and that caused how that area was supposed to play out to fall apart. The biggest unintentional shame here is that out of all the chases in Three Charms, it was the one with the most going on in the visual department. Pandemonium was raw on the village, and it felt like that. In comparison, all the chases in R are tightly structured and feel like spectacles, kinda like Daimyokais. And what's more, there's a larger variety of chase style? So it doesn't just feel like you're getting from point A to B without looking back. You're not just being funneled through a location with someone hot in your heels. You might be exploring a large town in a before and after, like with Shiraha's domain, or running about one completing errands like in the red light district. The Akaname bathhouse has added a few extra wings to compensate for the increased traffic, it becoming a true den of slimy inequity. You got your baths, your spare rooms, and dancers for entertainment. All that's missing is room service of the food variety. In Tsukumo's North Lab, you're put through a hazardous course like you're in some evil genius's underwater base, laser sharks not included, while in South, you're rummaging around a dilapidated facility scavenging parts. Azuki's domain is a scenic nature route where the Kodama congregate, hinting that the gun-toting Oni isn't all doom and gloom. She has a private flower garden she advises people not to trample through, lest they want to in their 10 spot. The area with the most character from Three Charms was the banquet hall, with all the kitsune partying about and having that fun double-back transition, so imagine if each location had that level of visual identity. That's what R goes for and lands. Even when a place isn't visually exciting, I think of the Akaname caves or Shiraha's mental palace, there's a moving part here or there or clever use of an RPG Maker asset to make it stand out in some way. The caves are the caves, one step above a dull, dank mine, but you have the water pools where all the Akaname frolic about, the amount of silhouettes conveying to us that this is their home proper. Or how there's an ice slide in the deeper recesses, with one of the few Pokemon jokes you can find. Expanding farther, there's the spike room where the Akaname's home ends and the industrial lab of Tsukumo's domain begins. Owing to the dreamlike nature of being inside Shiraha's mind, it's not about the surroundings, but what you see. You have these long corridors of nothing, then wham! You're right in the middle of a bizarre orgy. As the only place with random encounters and traditional RPG bosses, all of what you battle uses stock engine placeholders, adding to that out-of-body experience the fantastic journey is. It's like you're squaring off against vague memories of days gone by, barely comprehending the shape of what is attacking you. It really gels well with Shiraha's crumbling psyche, as if the very architecture of her mind got up and started throwing hands. And since Hakonen has a base of operations this time, it feels like he has a sanctuary to return to when the day is up, provided someone doesn't get the funny idea to nightcrawl him. As if to capstone this idea, it goes from a crummy ruin that is openly called a meat storage facility to a modest, if well-furnished, one-room home. The star of the show, though, is once again Minwa's art style. If you want my blanket statement, watch the previous Three Charms video as those thoughts carry over here. Quick! Grab my EpiPen while you're over there, as I'll need it again. The old guard have gotten some sprucing up. There's some new text box CGs that give the characters a better range of emotions. I'm a sucker for how adorable Yamachichi can be whenever she's thinking hard, so I'll go over to the newbies. The core design philosophy is still the same. You essentially do a double take with each character as what they look like and who they are creates a disparity, and outside of one, as I don't think the Kodamas adhered to the mission statement despite me liking their design, it's the greater emphasis that they're plants first. The newer cast fits the bill. Gun to my head, I couldn't tell you who I like more, Tsukumo or Shiraha. My personal bias shines forth. My favorite of Kinihito's bunkmates has always been Rhaenyra, but I like that Tsukumo isn't your typical spider monster girl. She's a nerd, a dork, A hikikomori obsessed with technology who gets into a tizzy when you don't understand what she's talking about, but is probably the second nicest person on Maharoba, right behind her best friend Magatsu. A slightly anatomically correct Spider-Woman who has to rely on her spindly head legs to stand up since her lower half is a spinneret, and who will stay locked up in her lab like she belonged to a trapdoor variant. Well, I showed in 3 Charms that I own her audio drama, which is English subtitled, and yeah. This image will suffice. God, I wish she had something like Magatsu, Yamachichi, or Azuki here, but she doesn't, nor does she have something akin in LS either, so I'll have to settle for beating Minwa to death with a rock, in Minecraft, for fumbling this fucking hard. I love Tsukumo. She's so me-coded. But let's not discredit Shiraha. Her design fucks. This is what I meant by Minwa having been inspired by Shin Megami Tensei, as the snake goddess wouldn't be out of place in the demonic compendium, sitting right next to Inanna and Mara. Shiraha, just in vibes alone, feels different from the rest of the cast. Sure, there is a hierarchy to Maharoba. Magatsu and Tsukumo are at the top as Elder and Vice, followed by Sister Kitsune as the third runner, but that scale isn't applicable to Shiraha. She's as equal parts monstrous, a massive distorted snake with far too many arms, as she is uniquely mesmerizing. Then to peer behind it to see practically nothing, she isn't a goddess despite her enormity, merely a wish born from a dream, is what ties her off in a bow. It kinda leaves Azuki as the odd one out of the triumvirate, but I should think before I speak. Or type. Outside, a fierce and belligerent-looking Oni who'll shoot you dead. Someone you should steer clear of. Inside, a scarred and damaged woman who needs a blanket, a hot cup of cocoa, and someone to vent to. Call me a pathetic romantic. I am. But my 3 favorite sets of CGs are Magatsu's second night crawl, the hotel lockup with Yamachichi, and Azuki's night crawl because no one does schmaltzy cute like Minwa. Especially with the last of the 3 where all that tension between the two melts away into sugary sweet goodness. My only gripes with the characters this time around are with Zashiki and Nobusuma. Yamachichi's sister doesn't do anything for me. She's there. Neither good nor bad. I have sort of the same opinion with the Ashimis. It's hard to do a gynoid design in today's day and age without stepping into similarity pitfalls. But seeing as her clinch rage attack is a blue screen, the robot's gonna pass. I wish the evolutionary elements were played up more to strengthen the connection between Nobusuma and Yamachichi. They both have the glowing eyes you wouldn't want peering at you during the dead of night, and I do like that she, the younger, is the chill one to the flighty eldest, but Zashiki, meanwhile, who's this sassy lost child? For the book metaphor, Zashiki works. You wouldn't know that she's a yokai. Doubly so as she has charisma out the wazoo, forcing you to ask the question if it's her abilities or personality. But she's that kind of succubus that lacks any traits to the point you have to be told that she is one. She's supposed to be a Zashiki Warashi, which parses because she's also technically the lolly of 3 Charms, but all of this is insisted upon, so it doesn't stick that well. She's built like Daimyokai, who's built like One Punch Man's Tatsumaki, plus the dancer's personality doesn't line up with the archetype, so Sashiki is a misfit for the lolly mold, unlike a Tamamo from MGQ or Lavenza from Persona 5. Or Melusine from Fate. It'd be like calling a character a furry, but all they have is the ears and the tail. Example, Fox McCloud is a furry, but Holo is not. But again, these are minor compared to the bigger picture of R being bigger and badder than its predecessor in a number of ways. all have seen the previous video. You know what 3 Charms is. But if you haven't, 3 Charms R is a puzzle RPG, emphasis on puzzle. You're rewarded more for understanding the ins and outs as opposed to having a higher number, is what I would claim, but that is one of the main differences with R. The difficulty is still as solid as ever, harder you could say. So about the changes, before I get into them, I'll need to go into structure as that piece of the design has also seen renovation. Where 3 Charms was a straight shot, linear adventure with no backtracking, R allows you to revisit areas whenever you want, whether to pick up items you didn't your first time through, to re-challenge yokai for parts of the plot, etc. R is still linear. Its overarching layout is surprisingly course-based, but there's more freedom for exploration. To help visualize what I mean, the first area of the game you are led down is the path to Azuki's domain. It's made up of the Fox Banquet, the Kodama Gardens, and Azuki's hunting grounds. You can think of each as their own level with distinct areas. The hunting grounds has the opening sniper segment leading into the game of tag at the rest area, then Azuki's firing range after that. But one will always lead into another. You need to get through the banquet, then the gardens, then the hunting grounds before you're allowed to tackle the next course. There is a hub that interconnects the beginning of each course together, and there is a new save system handled by the purple torches. They function about the same as TC's save interactables that also act as waypoints you can teleport between from the hub. That should serve as a good enough segue. If you're wondering why I'm not going over the beat-for-beat gameplay, excluding combat, it's close enough to what 3 Charms did that I don't really need to extrapolate further. You dodge hazards either through memory, timing, more than usually both, but there is a bigger uptick in traditional puzzles, like parsing riddles or doing math. There are changes to how the health stats are handled in regards to these developments, but let me finish as I was getting to that. 3 Charms R has a mild day-night system, mostly because you begin each day at Hakonen's hut and must climb the trial stairs, a task so long that it always takes the apprentice the full day to do so. We know yokai are nocturnal creatures, thus facilitating the need for the trial to take place at night. I prefaced mild as there isn't any time mechanics for the day passing. You can stay out for as long as your willpower doesn't hit 0. In that event, you are forcibly teleported back to Hakonen's hut. There are no game overs, as if you willingly chose to go back there, with your only options being to go to the shop or in the day. Yes, I'll get to that in a minute as it threw me for a loop as well. However, these steps introduce a new health stat for you to manage. Energy. That big, long, girthy bar is your total energy, technically your level if you cross-reference the status screen. There's very few instances of not wanting it to be full, as your energy level determines your max cap for vitality and willpower. No, don't ask me why the names have been changed around from the last title, it only serves to make this confusing. Willpower in R is vitality in 3 Charms, it's your health stat attacked when in the clinch, and vice versa. Vitality in R is willpower in 3 Charms, which acts as a secondary health stat as well as your MP/SP to perform runs, sealing, and the rest of Hakonen's abilities. When at max energy, you get the standard 120 willpower, 200 vitality, so make sure that you're topped off. While I did say that you lose willpower when in a clinch, losing it is now the penalty for bumping into anything considered hazardous or for failing a puzzle. To what severity is determined on both ends, you can be hit for as low as 20, I think, all the way up to basically dropping on the spot. Expect to be hit for around 30 to 40 though. Reading between the lines, you can infer that random battles are no longer a bother, and in fact, they no longer exist. In some capacity. Keeping high energy is the game plan for both exploring and when you have to do a fight, but there is a detriment to having it full. You're more likely to be night crawled. Night crawling is guaranteed if you drop in the field or interact with specific objects, but you'll likely have it sprung on you randomly. Anyone have an appreciation for the history of Japan? Know of the term yobai? The yokai love themselves some yobai. In gameplay terms, your energy drops back down to 1, which isn't saying anything, as to begin a day, you have to climb those stairs. There are ways to manipulate the night crawl lottery. Like I said, running out of willpower is the safest bet, but there are also aroma items you can use that selects a lucky bachelorette for the night, and running headlong into some obstacles will mark Hakonen for a night crawl in the event that he doesn't fall in the field. That's all to be said about exploration outside of what you can do at Hakonen's Love Shack. No matter if it's day or night, you can foster either the shrine or field in front of the house so they can produce either spirit water or vegetable, regaining either willpower or vitality based on how high you've cultivated the facility. Doing this takes miasma stones, which are those glowing spheres you see out in the wild next to ground glowies. M stones can also be spent at the Kitsune stores, one general, the other specialty. The general store sells healing items, food items, they heal willpower but only outside of an endurance trial, and equipment. Hakonen actually has equipment slots, but equipables provide very minor or situational buffs. Grab the Jade Hairpin replacement for that sweet vitality regen per turn, and you're practically settled. The specialty store concerns itself with Nightcrawl aromas and other items my brain is failing to remember, though it's a scam seen as the gallery unlocks after you've beaten the main and post-game. When it comes to Hakonen's hideout is decidedly random as well, so in my playthrough, I used it about twice and that was it. Explains why I can't remember its wares. Going back to M stones, while you find a good amount throughout the courses, they are also rewarded to you for winning endurance trials. That's the fancy name R uses for its encounters. Besides some quality of life updates, there are indicators now that tell you what limbs are sealed. The overall flow of battling hasn't changed, but has been expanded upon. You still need to pinpoint what limb or limbs are problem areas and seal them up. You're still balancing out vitality between running and using skills. You're still weighing up risks and timings to levy an advantage. But like with Hakonen's unwieldy bar, you've more than likely noticed the matching one on the other side. That's the yokai's energy. To actually defeat a yokai this time around, you need to deplete the whole meter, and while that might seem a lot, it's easier than you think. Yokai expend energy performing any action, unless it is sealed, including when they rage out of the seals, unless they have you in a clinch, or are explicitly shown to be untirable that way. However, yokai also lose meter when you reach maximum distance with run, or when you escape a clinch, bypassing any that don't naturally weaken over time. Because of this new addition, bosses, which every fight in R is, no longer run 3x3, 3 chases and 3 clinches. Expect varied phases, changes in attack patterns, typical boss fight etiquette. One such example are the QTE actions. Applicable in the overworld and battle screens, QTE actions pop up from time to time, ranging from 1 to 4. That's how many selections you have to make, mostly in the attempt to look away from the yokai unless you take unwanted damage. You get a total of 4 seconds per decision to choose, and you have to pick the option that gets you to not stare, so in a way, it's far harder than other QTEs you're probably used to. Slow readers need not apply. Also falling under this umbrella are surprise attacks and first strikes. More checklisting to ensure your vitality and energy is high. Besides having lower stats across the board with minimal energy, yokai will start their turn ahead of you, first strikes, and get 1 free action per turn if your vitality is below 50. Surprise attacks. If you weren't already in the weeds, as having that low vitality is a death sentence already, reset or hope you have some vitality items on standby. preferably a 40 or 50. As it was in 3 Charms, R has both a main and post-game scenario, though instead of one leading right into the other, you have to do a bit of time wasting during the transition before it unlocks. Go and sow those wild oats. But after all is through, you gain access to the gallery where you can replay scenes, fights, and be reminded that the spin-off is likely not happening. What a dour note to end this on. I have to give kudos to the restructuring of the main battle system into what it is, as now it feels like each test of endurance is a proper boss with its own nuances. Not only has this dramatically cut down the grinding, it allows the encounter design to be flexible with what it wants to do. Whereas the intricacies of the 3 Charms was down to how fights interacted with map traversal, which sadly is a victim of R's format change, and the interwoven nature of your abilities when it came to resisting yokai, most of the endurance battles panned out similarly in the first game, generally so. You ran through 3 escape phases, then 3 clinch phases with little deviance between the bosses, besides what moves they utilized, if they had a status effect or an aura or not, and what their specific threshold was for rage. While R keeps the strongest elements of its prequel, you're still maximizing your combat prowess while number counting, it shunts off the weakest link. Battles are no longer 3x3, and thus can have set pieces, phase changes, and other curveballs that make them dynamic and memorable. Not all are winners. There are 2 fights I would argue you could completely remove, and Bride Fox and Zashiki 1 are clear tutorials meant to either ease you into the endurance trials or reacquaint you with 3 Charms' system, but most have some distinct quirk or gimmick that makes them stand out. There's a reason why I love Tsukumo, not because she appeals to my sensibilities or that VA Sora Mame does an excellent job portraying her. Shut up, I'll continue to mention the audio drama because it's the good shit, but that she's an engaging fight start to finish. If it wasn't apparent, she adheres to the ruling that someone like Akaname does. There's an obvious weak point you should focus on, which you'll either intuit or see Tsukumo do it and want to immediately put a stop to it. What are spiders known for? If you guessed their legs, congratulations! You know exactly which limb to start targeting from the get-go to stuff Tsukumos want to haggle you in close range. Especially because that's a new-ish inclusion. If certain yokai manage to close the gap, that is an instant loss. You are specifically told that is the case in the fights with this caveat. Hakonen's inner monologue will warn the player, but this adds another layer that you have to be on top of. And nothing is scarier when you don't bind Tsukumo's legs and watch her jump 2 to 3 spaces closer to you. So you prevent the spider from pouncing on you, mostly dealing with her web attacks and the ever so common sweet breath technique that virtually all yokai have. Good thing this isn't Dragon Quest, as sleep would be a big problem here. So you run the plate routine, bind, rest, run, until you get Tsukumo to the edge of the arena, where you may have noticed something peculiar. Her energy isn't going down. Yeah, Tsukumo is the first proper boss that you can't outlast. With everyone before her, you could curl up defensively and let the yokai tire themselves out. That means you didn't have to put any amount of feet between you and your opponent. You could keep them at an arm's length until they got too close for your liking. Not with Tsukumo or a number of the late game bosses. You have to be proactive in the trial, otherwise you won't win. This pairs well with the risk-reward gameplay idea I mentioned in the last 3 Charms video, where if you've done the number crunching or have been paying close attention to when a yokai rages, you can seize those little windows of opportunity for big plays. Enforcing this, Tsukumo does have a status effect tied to her hands. It drains your vitality by 1 tick at the end of every turn for like 10 turns, and it supersedes the regeneration charm, which is hangnail levels of frustration, since the Vit Recharge Talisman is the best piece of equipment in the game, But do you want to run the risk of her breaking out quicker and letting her do her Superman impression accidentally, or stay safe and take the admittedly chance-based attack? After you've made Tsukumo play catch-up twice, that's when she goes into her clinch phase and where her whole entire strategy changes. Again, if you know anything about spiders, what do they do when they finally get prey in their midst? Why yes, they have a tendency to bite down and inject venom into their target. Do not let Tsukumo do that, for as neat as you might think it is to kiss a spider yokai. Okay, that might just be me. Tsukumo's mouth attacks in the clinch will debilitate you with status effects. She'll steal turns until your loss. That means breaking out of the hold as quickly as possible, as it is far easier to lose the trial because of how detrimental it is to let Tsukumo give you a spider's kiss, while staying on top of your vitality so you aren't dogged in the second chase phase. I don't know what a majority of the surprise attacks do, but that proves to be a solid enough warning to not let vitality drop dangerously low. Those options aren't counted towards the turn, so letting a yokai move twice was unthinkable for me. Some are just, the yokai moves closer to you, but even still, that can throw out a successful attempt as that layers up. You're taking vitality damage in the chase, so the piddly amount you regen when below 50 lands you in a vicious cycle that surprise attacks hammer home. Phase 3 of the Tsukumo fight is the same as Phase 1, seal, run, rest, repeat, but going into Phase 4, she pulls out her gun, thankfully no one is trapped in the closet, and starts blasting. Stuck in the webbing of the Kandata gun, Tsukumo drops any pretense of strategery and only uses her arms to lure in Hakonen, a callback to their initial interaction at the top of the steps. Getting gummed up wouldn't be so bad if the webbing didn't take the apprentice roughly 5 to 6 turns to pull off of him, and that it takes a chunk of his vitality during the duration, a full 30 to be exact. This is the easiest phase, but you have to go into it at a deficit. You won't be at full vitality, as you have to make Tsukumo go after you. She'll break all current seals on her before using the Kandata gun, so you'll need to bind arms to stand a chance. And with the toll taxed on you, Vit can get shockingly low. This is worrisome going into Phase 5, which is a standard chase phase. But if you can survive for this long, the rest of the fight should go your way, as Tsukumo's played all her tricks. Not to be outdone, Shiraha is a trial I had to reset a couple of times because of how expansive her moveset is. She is a boss that fundamentally changes depending on what equipment you have on. If you don't have the postman's cap, making Hakonen immune to being slimed, Shiraha will tend to use her mouth to set up the slime status, locking Hakonen in place and switching to her movement-based skills. She will only use her arms for movement if you've been slimed. Otherwise, she'll primarily default to them and her legs for vitality attacks. She also has a desperation move tied to her arms that is a real boon to get, as having the snake goddess stunned for 2 turns grants you a breather, as well as a QTE action of 3 during the midpoint of the scuffle. If you happen to wear the postman's cap going into the trial, Shiraha never uses the slime attack, instead replacing it with a mouth attack that is far scarier. Not only does it ding you for 20 vitality, it brings you closer to her. Would it be a shock to anyone if I said that Shiraha isn't exactly someone you want in your personal space until the game says otherwise? What threw me for a loop is that 3 Charms R accentuates any movement skill a yokai does with the new system. So when I saw Shiraha move with her arms that one time, not putting 2 and 2 together and realizing it was because I was slimed, I kept sealing arms when I should have been using that energy for mouth, as regardless, it is her main method of harassment. Shut her up to shut her down. If you don't share the same brain size as I do, a withered raisin, at least that is what my doctor tells me, you can turn the somewhat difficult Shiraha trial into a cakewalk, since she'll never try to get closer to you. It's basically all or nothing with the Snake Goddess, as without her compelling voice, all she can do is wave her arms and wiggle her body at you in the vain attempt to stop you. Conversely, her singular clinch phase, this is what makes Shiraha unique in that you don't get a full fight due to extenuating circumstances, chiefly Shiraha's inability to comprehend what is going on, is barely worth a mention. If you're watching this on Patreon, the CG gives it away, but for those on YouTube, I'll give you 2 numerical characters. 6'7"? Shit, wrong number. 6'9"? Hakonen is definitely not 6 foot, though Shiraha might be taller than 9. Sealmouth. It's funny how she's built up as this legitimate threat, and for the most part she is, but it's like you're fighting Vendrick with all the giant souls or Sybil having defeated all her organs. At her peak, I doubt Hakonen would have been able to step up to Shiraha. Hell, Magatsu probably wouldn't have either, but she's tragically no longer standing at the top of the mountain. I think that's why I also enjoy the Shiraha trial, because that thematic angle hangs over it. You've been through the whole village, witnessing how distorted the relationship is between humans and yokai, wondering why the Snake Goddess, with her infinite power and seeming love of humanity, has gone the totalitarian approach, but it's all the delusions of an extremely fragile psyche ripping itself apart. You go from disliking, maybe even hating Shiraha, only for the smoke show to be blown away. The visage of this malicious, voracious serpent revealed to be a quivering worm locked inside its own head. The vestiges of which make up another set of bosses I like. The Shards of Shiraha and the Living Grudge are traditional RPG battles shaped around 3 Charms' mechanics. I have to admit, as this is the inner shipper buried deep within me, it's probably one of my favorite parts of R due to Hakonen and Yamachichi directly working together to overcome the odds. For as much as she's down on herself, Yamachichi is the true DPS star, her Nimpo slaughtering whatever comes before it. The caveat is that, well, she isn't fuel efficient, the tank abbot of yokai. Yamachichi's jutsus are all costly and need to be aided by Hakonen's adjoining charms to maximize her damage. In a straight-up brawl, without one, the other falls. Hakonen's specialty is amazing cardio and ability to lock opponents off from doing anything. Besides giving Daimyokai a thrashing Yakuza style, he doesn't throw hands. 3 Charms follows an old ruling as well. If the main character is defeated, that's game over. This places Hakonen squarely into the support role, debuffing any threat into non-action, buffing his evasion rate so he's not in harm's way, and topping off Yamachichi with his own vitality. Meanwhile, the Leech Ninja is a combination DPS tank. She has attacks and can make herself a priority target with a taunt, but also has the means of directly healing Hakonen's willpower should it start taking damage. The battles in Shiraha's mind are all about managing numbers, a fact made prevalent with all of Shiraha's demons targeting both health pools. Running low on vitality as Hakonen still allows mobs to go for surprise attacks, but now leaves Yamachichi without a means to use her skills. Likewise, Yamachichi can directly heal Hakonen's willpower with her heal, but it eats a turn and needs vitality to use. It becomes more of a balancing act, since the only aspect of 3 Charms' mechanics that have been dropped are the ones related to escaping, so no tiring out the yokai, and run has been reworked into an evasion buff, and I do believe Minwa could make a whole game like this. I would like a whole game like this. Maybe with Hakonen getting partnered up with various yokai he's befriended, tornado tag style, and they all have varying skill sets that favor specific parts of his loadout. Maybe he gets access to new abilities depending on who is his active partner, and like here he could get new moves to slot into his repertoire, but now I'm dreaming of pipes. It's what makes the team up memorable, even though the whole slew of battles you do inside Shiraha can be one-sided / highly susceptible to randomness. Or heavily scripted, as the Living Grudge is merely a healing check followed by applying all the seals to it so that Yamachichi can knock it out. These strings of engagement are another one of the multitude of facets that R introduces to seem grander than its predecessor, like the real-time bouts with Soul Scatter. While I have little notes for the Daimyokai and Azuki shootouts, dodge, shoot, replenish, and use any healing items you have, to me it is the thought that counts. It's an add-on to what already worked for 3 charms, that being movement and timing puzzles, and while you can see how stally they are, Azuki more than Daimyokai, since the former runs you up against a time limit, as well as having to clear out crystals to take shots at the Tiny Terror, I can appreciate the want for experimentation. Speaking of, those are all still really great, the movement and timing puzzles. It's more of what I love from 3 charms, just with shuffling scenarios. At one instance, you're back in 3 charms, dodging through kitsunes as you try to make it to the end of a large room. The next, you're sliding across a floor of ice, bumping into walls, and having to offset the impact to vitality. There's a race against Nobusuma, a maze where you have to find the foxes blocking the path, a maze with a lights out gimmick that isn't insufferable like last time, and a bridge you have to find the right path through by listening to the audio cues from the floor. There's a reason why the last movement and timing puzzle is a straight up chase with Kyo Daimyokai. While I am saddened by the severing of the interconnectedness between the chase fights and overworld exploration, it was in service to make the endurance trials more standalone, and we got tons of puzzle variation out of it. Final Daimyokai is more of what we got from the first game's finale, just more, and I'm a sucker for that. Enemies turned allies is a great trope, regardless of brevity. I hate the Arkham fight, but I do love seeing Dante and Virgil team up, and instead of matching a yokai to a specific limb, you're using the skills you learned through R to counteract Daimyokai's abilities based on their description. Like when she tries to envelop Hakonen in illusions, you use the Illusion Breaker ability. Even with fights that are kinda middling in the grand scheme of things, there's something to latch on to. Princess Kodama is one of the few bosses who directly attacks your energy, making her trial a race against atrophy, while Ashimi has what is in all intents and purposes Gaia mode, powering up her attacks so they hit harder. Who's the real upset though is Zashiki too. I've lambasted her underutilization of the story and mismatched design and presentation, but she doesn't falter when it comes to her second boss. It's the last standard fight in the game, seen as Azuki 2 is a shootout and Daimyokai 2 is heavily scripted. Taking this spot, Zashiki needed to go big or go home, and she delivered. Fitting that her second trial takes place on a stage in front of an audience. To be frank, there isn't too much to decipher from Zashiki. She's a dancer, so her legs are her core asset, and her scariest limb to leave unsealed. Other than that and the intermittent vitality drain from the crowd, she's basically all the rest of the trials you've done up to this point rolled up into one. She doesn't tire herself out, requiring you to run from her. She changes her strategy when in a clinch, her arrogance loudly announcing how great her hands feel, and she opts for desperation attacks from time to time. But like with Hakonen, it showcases where she started to where she ended up. Zashiki is a legitimate problem if you misstep during the tango, usually by mistiming your run attempts during the turn she either rages out or the crowd demoralizes Hakonen. Both if you haven't been keeping track of their timers, opening you up to surprise attacks. And the send-off for her is a great capstone. When the tides aren't in her favor, she binds Hakonen and option selects into letting his willpower run dry that way. How boring. Especially with an audience. Leading to Hakonen provoking Zashiki, what he learned from her during the first fourth of R, into action. Spurred on by Hakonen wanting to take her head on, almost as if pleading her to push herself further, Zashiki tries to rise to the occasion and ultimately trips and falls flat on her face. It's a wonderful little character moment that elevates the whole fight and cements Hakonen and Zashiki's relationship as friendly rivals. However, what I said earlier about the puzzle variation doesn't mean I enjoyed all of them. This might sway over to personal grievance rather than what I would call poor design, but the amount of actual puzzles R offers up to you is way too damn high, at least for my liking. Let's get this out of the way now. My favorite subset of puzzles in R are all the timing or movement related memorization ones, whether avoiding obstacles in a pattern like slipping through the foxfire, spike traps, Kodama pheromones, etc., dealing with an active chaser like when Azuki is gunning for you or when Kyo Daimyokai is on your ass, walking the crumbling bridge, though that took a bit of trial and error to completely understand, or when dueling Daimyokai or Azuki with Soul Scatter, though the AI's proclivities can sometimes sway between the extremes of annoying to brain dead. None of the rest I care for. There is a ranking to this, so I'll start with the least egregious. All the word and math riddles. This should include the trivia of Sister Fox, but that's more memorization, remembrance, and I consider it separate enough for me to like it. There's a custom robo-certified, "What number are we on?" question, so I can't hate it. My problem with the riddles is that there is no unified layout for them, meaning the actual consequences and thus challenge of the riddles is lopsided. And no better is this seen with the tenement and new district doors. Outside of my own failings, video creation has done wonders for my math skills, and I generally pooed it with the last batch in the red light district. Not knowing the solution leaves you with a slap on the wrist. You take a hit to willpower, similar to when you bump into most anything else, and go about your merry day. You should have a stockpile of healing items by both points, so all this pomp and circumstance signifies nothing. If you wanted, you could brute force your way like a caveman and circumvent the intended solution. I did that for the tenements, as the way the hints were worded, particularly with the final stretch, I didn't get it. I make videos on the internet. That qualifies me for some sort of educational restitution. Sound familiar, though? This notion of taking a brick to the intents of the game design? This is the salt problem under a different guise. But money grinding isn't apparent, I hear you chime. Healing items that are usable outside of combat cost pennies, and because fights and general exploration shower you in miasma shards, you can fork over the dough to upgrade the shrine and field, and still have leftover dollars for emergency bento. Despite having the means now to heal willpower in fights, thus lowering the need for consumables except in rare situations brought about by poor management in combat, I'm still left salty. On the opposite side, speaking back the oath at Shiraha's church punishes your minor cock-up by resetting the day, requiring you to skip the adjacent nightcrawl scene as this is the trigger for it, climb back up the stairs in the morning, and warp back over to the lantern to get another try. At least the doors needed you to fuck up 4 times in a row at max energy, provided if you didn't use common sense and heal in between any mistake. If you don't talk to everyone and parse their Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest dialogue, I had to snap a number of photos on my phone to have the hints on standby. I have about 15 photos uploaded to the Amazon cloud that come from R. Get treated to some MDLB for your troubles. If my mentioning of the original Metroidvania didn't clue you in, yeah, you're expected to goof up during this moment because the game wants you to. But not in that, hey, you can actually do this the first time through, but you have to be knowledgeable kind of way, like with Vanguard and Demon Souls, but in a, hey, here's contradicting answers designed to frustrate you way. 3-part in its layout, the oath asks who should seek Shiraha's faith, what it wishes for non-believers, and what happens when you are shot with their arrows. The first 2 questions are meant to be tricks on themselves, enforced by them coming back to back, while the last has 2 hints, one false, one true. Before I even begin, though, you aren't told what the correct answers are even when you choose them, just an absolute "congratulations, go talk to the chief," or "you were found lacking, mommy will see you now," when the test is over. That already grinds my gears, since how am I supposed to know if what I'm choosing is the correct option? There's no feedback, thus you can't be sure. Coupling that with the want and need the quiz has for trying to trip you up, and it becomes unbearable. You could believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that you've chosen correctly, only to find yourself in the madness of permutations. Now, I can't math. The last time I had to deal with permutations and combinations was junior and senior algebra, but even I know that 3 questions, each with 3 to 4 answers, with only one set being correct, means randomly guessing is a no-go. This stumps a no-skill attack. Cause then you'll be doing shit like 111, 112, 113 until the sun burns out. So, the questions proper. The first is a trick. From the description, you're meant to infer that the humble and poor are selected as followers, which a lady in the village backs up, but where this is a trick is that when you're asked what is to be done to non-believers, they are meant to be redeemed, sending my brain spiraling. If they're meant to be redeemed, doesn't that mean you would want them, the evil and rich, to be followers? Because that would mean they would be redeemed in the eyes of the cult. So, and because I have to stress this again, you aren't given any reaction to what you choose until your judgment, wouldn't that mean those who are already humble and poor who would be followers aren't actually the answer to question 1, and instead it's the evil and rich? It's a logic problem, especially if you know that one of the golden rules of religion is that you're supposed to spread it to where it is least visible among people who are in spiritual danger. Paul's antics make up whole books of the New Testament, from Acts to maybe Hebrews. There's a debate if it was one of his books. It's not a hard jump in logic to assume that if Shiraha's religion is trying to redeem the evil and rich, she would want them as followers because then they would be redeemed. But no, don't fall into that trap. Otherwise you'll be stuck like I was. The third and final question asks you to state what happens when a follower gets hit by an arrow, which is where I draw that Simon's Quest comparison, because 2 NPCs bring that up, and if that's the one that is roadblocking you, flip a coin. They get overwhelmed by happiness, but if you're cocksure that it's they get overwhelmed with a sense of duty, back to the permutations you go. And if you do watch the Nightcrawl of Shiraha, it makes it messier since Hakonen's default disposition during the scene is a mixture of the 2 statements. I spent way too long trying to solve this, but at least I could draw on something that was opaquely told to me. Separated from the rest of Ashami's trial, as you have timing memory with the spike floors, trivia, and a boss, the number gates punish you for playing too well of a game. I don't hate the idea behind them. You match your health stats to what they ask for. Basically the tenements without their confusing hints, and more roundabout as you don't have soul scatter to directly augment one of the numbers, while also being less dangerous since not fulfilling the criteria means the fence doesn't open and not that your balls get served on a platter. The first gate requires willpower to be low, simple as running into some hazards. The second wants your energy to be at a certain point. Okay. How do I do that? Well, you bump into the Kodamas back in Azuki's domain. How are you supposed to know this? If you were reckless, you probably got smooched by them a couple of times while going through their garden, noticing that your energy got drained. I wasn't. I tend to be mindful of my positioning, almost like I played the first game and know that this series is big on pattern recognition and thinking things through when exploring, so my only clue, which I will admit is clever in the same way Tsukumo's boss is laid out, was that Princess Kodama's attacks affected energy. That would mean the Kodamas might also do something along those lines,
But it's weird knowing that by playing too well, you have to connect those dots and that there's no other net to catch you. Oh, and if you guessed right when doing Princess Kodama's trial, you'd never see her energy drain attack, but I will admit how much stretching I'm doing for that point. But enough with the softballs. Let's drop right into the pits of hell. The fucking fetch quests. Evil comes in two as you have a duo to complete. Finding the materials for Daimyokai and running the errands for the Red Light Association. Firstly, big bang of pacing killers these are. The plot drops dead in its tracks for you to gather shit, compounded by how long it might actually take you to find what you're looking for. Collecting the Chinkov's guns for the ending of Shiraha's section isn't as bad for this. The plot hasn't truly kicked off as you've only dealt with Bride Fox and Zashiki, but the drawn-out nature of being delivery boy for the Akaname manager does put into perspective that you're right at the end of the story, about ready to go up against Daimyokai and Azuki, yet you've been coerced into doing small shit for a lame reason. To the nitty-gritty, both quests are extremely awful mechanically for sundering the plot, once again down to how their instructions are worded, and it stems from one sticking point from each. Daimyokai's collection of macabre knickknacks has the White Dew, while the Akaname has the Kodama Den. The wording for both goes as follows. The White Dew is located somewhere among the foxes in their banquet, approximately the outside one. Zashiki is also in close proximity, and I don't know which brothel it was, but the outside had a wooden veneer, lampposts earmarked the place, and it was run by Kodama. Those don't sound like bad hints, but the ones in comparison are more direct. You're outright told to go to the rundown shack in Kodama territory / Hakonen's hut for the other two items, and the rest of the Akaname job has you go to places you can't miss, as you're told specifically where to go, while the vagueness of each can lead you running in circles. You know how many banquets the foxes are holding throughout the first area? Like 20. Maybe 20. 20 depending on your definition of a banquet. Is this small gathering a banquet? You have to rely on the Zashiki hint, recalling where you saw her dance. There was the boss arena, but that's considered inside. The little grove before Daimyokai put you to task, but it's not there. And that's it? Wrong! One of the paths you had to go on during gameplay was a larger party with nothing to call attention to it besides Zashiki being on her stage. You could talk to the Kitsunes and that was it, unless you wanted cash and prizes and spent time walking around the slab, which was entirely optional. You weren't in any danger. Hell, Zashiki doesn't force you into a QTE if your eyes lock, unlike the Grove, so there is nothing to remember the area by. And because this is on the footpath, you have to recall which exact section this place was. Was it after Fox Tag 1, but before Banquet Hall? When did I deal with Bride Fox? Comparatively, the shack is at the end of the Kodama area, and you run by it, peeking inside to find nothing, before being told by Daimyokai to go back there, and you return to the hut at the end of each day to rest and recover. Oh, but Grave Lord Nito help you when you're in the Red Light District. The delivery point you are told to find doesn't line up with what you are told. See that hole in the ground? That's the Kodama's parlor. Is it surrounded by lampposts and has a wooden veneer? Yes. Kinda. If you want to stretch your description. But I don't see no Kodama greeter trying to hustle me inside for a 2-for-1 special. There's an entirely separate building on the far side of the map that has the exact same criteria, plus a Kodama is waiting outside napping on the job, so guess where I went first? And if you're like me and exhaust the dialogue of the townies, thus know the lay of the land, you get quite perplexed and start wondering what the moon logic is when the place you think you know his location isn't. Adding more strikes to the Akaname's favors, each one is an extended sequence, running up the clock in an effort to kill the pace. Favor 1, you get the QTE fest with the twin Kodamas. Favor 2, the Kitsune prostitute scene. Favor 3, the hotel lockup. Favor 4, the new district doors. It keeps going on and fucking on. And while I like what these do for characterization, the Kitsune and hookup bits demonstrate how like-minded humans and yokai are, and the new district's loosey-goosiness is backed by Sister Kitsune and her wanting to go against the establishment to break those walls down further, all of this adds an extra hour, nearing 2 if you run into problems like finding the Kodamas or having slow reflexes for the endurance battle against the twins, to the totality. I like the inclusion of the QTEs. It adds to the chaotic nature and underhandedness of battling yokai, like they're willing to do anything to get an advantage. But having a fight be one long sequence of them showcases why they are rare attacks or used as interludes between phases. If you don't go into the twins with full energy, one misclick and you're fucked. Willpower damage is unavoidable, and they do half of it on a perfect run. That's about 8 QTEs. Best flex up on your reading comprehension speed and decision making. As I've hit the majority of the low notes, my last aspect to mostly nitpick is how random some of the encounters can go. Exclusively the ones with additional party members, barring the DPS healing check of the Living Grudge. Look, if R wants you dead, it'll have your head. Whenever the fragments of Shiraha rage out, they have a chance to do a double hit move that will instantly kill Hakonen if he isn't buffed by the run skill or Yamachichi has Shadow Guard up. They don't always target Hakonen nor use this move all the time as they rage out, but knowing your life is partially in the AI's fluctuating aggression isn't reassuring. It can be funny. Less humorous, the same problem crops up with the Daimyokai finale, except damage and healing received is wholly reliant on the AI. Sometimes Daimyokai will waste her time with sealed legs and mouth attacks, wasting time or hurting vitality. Other times you'll get twin lion-fisted or have stones thrown at your willpower, which is a big problem as Azuki's heals are applied after every 2 turns, and she focuses on what is, I think, percentagely lower. She can screw you over by healing vitality when you really need willpower, as a quick rest will heal the former, while you need to expend 20 or use an item for the latter. And going against the script Daimyokai 2 wants you to follow, that being seal legs at all cost, heal vitality, run, rinse, repeat after rage, can leave you behind the 8 ball. As I had a missing audio track in my files and had to find it, otherwise R would crash. Proof of how long I've owned my copy as I've moved my visual novel folder across multiple drives, as well as consolidated folders based on series. I had to do Daimyokai's trial around 4 times, and at least once, I would get bogged down needing to heal for a turn. Oh, and I don't know why the affected Kitsune or Akanami Angel are fights at all. Both are gimmies, both have no relevance, and seem to exist to pad out a number I'm not privy to, and their placements don't make too much sense. The Kitsune is right before Princess Kodama and the Akaname Shiraha, so did we really need a warm-up like Ashimi? You can remove both and nothing would change. While still of high quality, of the two, I definitely prefer the original 3 charms over R. R has the more interesting story, what with Azuki and Shiraha being fascinating pierces beyond the veil of this world, and I do like the links that Hakonen struggles against when it comes to understanding the culture he has placed himself in, both as a sorcerer in training, not knowing much about the craft, and as someone who is wanting to live on Maharoba, not fully grasping its politics, leading to infighting between the residents. But R commits a cardinal sin in my books: pacing. It is all over the place, probably because of its larger scope. I can't fault its ambition. The elements of the story it wants to purely focus on are nailed out of the park. Azuki's dilemma as a person torn down the middle highlights the negatives of humans and yokai, with Hakonen having to sort all that out. She, alongside Shiraha, are excellent villains of circumstance. The generational trauma that was central to the snake goddess's existence unwittingly passed down to the hybrid. It's also why I like Tsukumo as a reference point, as she is far and away leagues removed from all that, her petty squabble with Magatsu brushed aside because that's what it is in the big picture. Little shit that can be solved by talking it out. Her psyche isn't fundamentally damaged to the point that it needs to be confronted. Tsukumo made a bad call and wants closure. Where the story loses me, ironically enough, is when the previous villain gets involved, Daimyokai. It's weird that she takes up the spot in the true finale, crowbarring her way into the big bad position when it doesn't feel earned, especially compared to Shiraha and Azuki. It made sense in the last title, but the Grima Wormtongue archetype she's been saddled with only works when she is stirring the pot, from continuing to harass our former monk, or instigating Shiraha's conclusion, or getting Azuki riled up past reasoning that Hakonen has no other choice than to directly confront the hybrid. Daimyokai works. But then her overall plan feels like a last-minute inclusion, contributing to how back-heavy R is. The Red Light District is long enough as is, serving as both a come-down from the narrowly avoided apocalypse caused by a rampaging Shiraha, and a bit of a theme examination due to the activities that happen between man and yokai, but squeezing in both Daimyokai and Zashiki makes it feel bloated. Like someone realized, oh shit, we haven't given conclusions to these arcs, where do we put them? And that's a broad problem with the cast. Some have way more clarity or emphasis than others. Remember when Bride Fox and Furnami were in the plot for a cup of coffee? You've introduced Yamachichi's sister Nobusuma into the mix. Hell, there's confirmation that they evolved from one into the other, but outside of a teaching moment, those factoids might as well be unsaid. I can't hate Zashiki. Her silly rivalry of Hakonen serves as a soft reflection, mirroring the apprentice's own ideals back at him compared to Daimyokai and Azuki, who directly challenge them, but the dancer's done a disservice by how unfocused she is in the long run. Same with the damaged Ashimi, highlighting the softness under Tsukumo's spidery thread, but at least this has payoffs connected to Azuki and Shiraha. I get strong Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc vibes, compounded by R being a sequel and not the first go-around. Ensemble writing can be a hurdle, and obviously I do prefer how the main gameplay loop has been retooled from the first game to R. Grinding has thankfully gone the way of the dodo, and each encounter still feels like a war of attrition, yet is ratcheted up due to the new mechanics. But the heavier inclusion of logic and math problems, out-and-out puzzle solving, and fetch quests muddies how interconnected the pathing on the overworld was with the escape battles. The puzzles also run the gamut from being so inconsequential that you can brute force your way through with a stockpile of items, like the new district doors, to dropping you on the spot for a minor mishap, the pledge at the village, to being a fucking fetch quest. Does it surprise you that my favorite of the bunch were all the timing puzzles, like dodging Azuki's crosshair, avoiding the swimming Akaname, or shrugging off the go-go dancers? Again, still high quality, but you can tell how pronounced the peaks and valleys are. Two done, technically two left. Shrift is its own series. There are 2 games as of right now, but the sequel's main character's unrelated to what Kazuya gets up to, at least in terms of the Road to Paradox. I feel as if I should mention that there are other tertiary titles that do have a connection. Parade Buster, Succubus Rhapsodia, Succubus Quest, who had Alma feature as a boss in the sequel Academy, and ROBFS4U alongside Super Monsters and Girls, which had a Shrift collab using Daji, no relation to TTC's character of the same name, and the already gone over Succubus Prison, which does double dip in Paradox, having a standalone collab with MGQ and making up part of the villains cast in Land of Night, while also having a trio of characters in Paradox's main plot inspired by SP Sisters, but a number of these don't have plot ramifications. They're mostly cameos or only show up in 7 Heroes, partly due to when some of the other games were released, as I think Parade Buster was before the original MGQ, but I'm not too familiar with it. As in, I know what PB is, but I've never played it. Lonesome Spirit and Shrift's post-game EX scenarios, meanwhile, are load bearers for a few of Paradox's developments. Paradox's plot escaping containment is an understatement if the metaphysical reality of the universe and how one tiny nudge can shift everything spiraling into the abyss didn't tip you off. And wouldn't you believe, the canon event for Paradox's whole undertaking is a doozy. I talk about it in the Showtime reel for MGQ Chapter 1. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/Let's Talk About Games, no apostrophe in the Let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the live commentary Showtime reels where I ramble my way through games gone by. As said at the top, like, comment, subscribe, share, become a ticket holder, or don't. I ain't your Uncle Monkey. And as always, this showing of 3 Charms R is over, but stay tuned for our next feature. Another follow-up, this time Hotline Miami 2, wrong number.